Do we have
Okay,
an
Mr.
American
President,
flag?
you are good to go.
Do we have an American flag? I'm sorry. We have no American. Okay. All right. 7, closed session, reconvene open session, procedural business 5:30, call to order. Board of Trustees hereby reconvening opening session at 5:37. Roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by name and trustee area. Dr. William Mellinger, trustee area 1.
Dana Ridland, trustee area 2.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3.
Scott Kraft, trustee area 4.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, Running Springs, Arrow Bear Lake, Green Valley Lake.
And I was trying to ask real quick, and I do not have an American flag. Does anyone else? Don't. Well, Dr. Fricker, without an American flag, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Okay, please stand, put your hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Fricker.
You're welcome.
7, closed session report. Announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. We have no actions that need to be reported. 8, public testimony. Public comment period for items listed on this agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter of jurisdiction of the governing board. The public comment period is administered by state law and is the point in the meeting set aside for members of the public to share their opinions with the board. Open meeting laws do not permit the board to engage in dialogue or answer questions, though it may not take action on non-agenda issues raised at the public comment period. The board, for example, may refer any matter to the superintendent for review or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Protocols for speakers. Any person who wishes to address the governing board on agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter of their jurisdiction must complete a green speakers form, except it's slightly different on a Zoom meeting, and submit it to the executive secretary to the superintendent before the meeting is called to order. Individual speakers are allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda item. The board limits the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. Speakers who have complaints against board members or staff are encouraged to seek resolution to those complaints by using the Rim of the World Unified School District written complaint procedure rather than orally addressing them at a meeting. The board will not respond to such complaints until the applicable complaint procedure, BPAR 1312.1, has been followed and has reached the board level. Where a complaint concerns a district employee identifiable by name, position, or other facts, the board cannot respond until proper written notice has been given to the employee pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. Decorum. The governing board is interested in the ideas and opinions of all stakeholders and endeavors to incorporate community views into its deliberations and decisions. At the same time, it must be able to conduct its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, in accordance with Board Bylaw 9323 and Government Code Section 54957.9, audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting. Open meeting laws do not confer any privilege or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law. The public's understanding and cooperation are appreciated. Public comments. We do have one public comment tonight, and that is Lexi Garcia, and her issue is attendance issues. Lexi, I believe you are coming on, but we don't see.
Lexi has not joined.
Oh, okay. And did you hear anything else from her, Mark?
No, I have not heard anything.
I I guess if she comes on, since we only had the one comment, you can let me know later. Okay, Mark?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is RIM Teachers Association and representative and California School Employee Association representatives. And I don't think we have any representatives present tonight.
I don't believe so.
That's correct.
Thank you. We'll go on to reports and presentations. Number 1, business services. Audit report. Jenny Haberlin, Chief Business Official.
Hello, thank you very much. I would like to introduce who's joining our Zoom now, Mr. Royce Townsend. He's an audit partner from Eide Bailey. They previously known as VTD, Vadnick Train and Company. That have been our longtime auditors, although Royce is new to working with our district due to their rules of every 5 years, we have to have a new audit partner. So Royce, welcome. Thank you very much.
I made it on.
You made it on it.
Yes.
And didn't have to drive up in the snow. So.
Oh my gosh. I commend you all for having to deal with the elements up there. It's got to be just simply a handful. So with that said, I do have a, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Would you like me to share my screen? I have the report you sent me.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll just let you know when to move forward.
Okay.
So again, my name is Royce Townsend, and I'm presenting your audited financials as of June 30th, 2030. There we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you.
Okay. Let me just, oops. I have to move my Zoom a little bit because it's blocking my, there we go. Okay.
All right, there we go. So that's my introduction. I'll let you move on to the next slide, please. And what is being presented this evening is the report on the audited financial statements with 3 specific areas that we're going to speak to: the financial statements, the federal awards, and the state compliance. Everything in these audit reports is yours. The only part of the audit report that is actually the auditor's is the opinions that we provide on each of the 3 respective areas. Next slide, please. In addition, we'll report on the bond measure W. We'll speak to the financial statements as well as the performance. And that performance, just the key here, is the compliance with Article 13A of the state constitution, as well as the bond measure requirements. Next slide, please. So I always like to start these presentations with just a reminder as to the audit itself. And the audit is in a process intended to provide reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And of course, that's in contrast with total assurance, which means, total assurance would mean that we're looking at every single transaction, and that's not what happens here. I mentioned to you the auditor opinion. The highest level of opinion assurance that we can provide is an unmodified opinion. So if I were to say something other than unmodified, you certainly want to ask me why that's the case. At the end of the day, though, I think the intent here is to provide you as a governing board some assurance regarding the information that you're receiving from your business management, because you are using that information to make your decisions. A little bit of there regarding how the audit process works, and then I'll let you move to the next slide. As you know, if you've looked at these audit reports, there's just a number of pages, 90 to 100 pages, I believe. And so there's 2 specific pages that I like to draw to the attention of the governing board. The first one that we'll talk about is the summary of auditors' results, and this is a snapshot of yours, as well as the schedule of financial trends. So let's start with the summary of auditors' results, and I'll let you move to the next slide, please. It summarizes the outcome of those 3 respective areas that I noted earlier. So if you were looking at this via a hard copy, that would be page 93. If you're looking at it via a PDF copy, that would be page 100. And so let's start with the first area that the audit looks at. That's the financial statements as a whole. The auditor's opinion is an unmodified opinion. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified as it relates to the internal control structure that supports the financial statements. As it relates to the federal awards, again, an unmodified opinion. This year, we were required to test 2 federal major programs, and including a number of COVID-19 related programs. We did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies related to internal control or compliance related to the 2 major federal programs. And then lastly, the next slide, please. State compliance. Again, an unmodified opinion for about 32 of 33 programs. The only one that we have a qualification on was related to the attendance independent study programs. There were no material weaknesses identified as related to internal control. We did identify, though, a significant deficiency related to the programs noted above. Next slide, please. I mentioned 2 specific pages in the audit report, and the second one, again, is the schedule of financial trends. Page 76, if you're looking at a hard copy, and a PDF would be page 81. This is the only place in the audit report where historical information is provided. So I always like to say, trends provide a picture of where you've been and where you're going. And so from my perspective, a governing board should always focus on the trends and look for the most important trends, especially if they're trending in a way that you don't want to see. The good news here is that when I look at this page, I see that the district has incurred operating surpluses in all of the past 3 years. Currently, you're projected to have a deficit in the year that we're in right now, the 22-23, but that's budget. And of course, budget is subject to change throughout the year. Another positive trend is the district continues to maintain its available reserves, and for a district your size, that's very critical. And then lastly, this is one that I've seen across the board for all of our clients, but total long-term obligations have decreased by $17.2 million, and most of that decrease is attributable to the increase in pension contributions the past few years. I'll let you turn to the next slide. So that summarizes the outcome of the regular audit, and let me speak briefly to Measure W, then we'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. As it relates to financial Measure W, there's 2 areas, once again, that we look at: financial statements and performance. As it relates to the financial statements, an unmodified opinion with no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified. When it comes to performance, this year we tested 97% of available expenditures, and all expenditures tested were found to comply with Article 13A of the state constitution and or the bond measure requirements. Namely, then what we're saying is for those expenditures that we tested, they were spent in accordance with statutory law and how you told folks you're going to spend those monies as it relates to the bond measure requirements. So with that said, I'll let you turn to the last slide, which is my opportunity to answer any questions you may have regarding the audit of your financial statements as well as Measure W.
Royce, this is Bill Mellinger, President. Can you just address those deficiencies in attendance that you were mentioning?
Yeah, that was related to, we said attendance/independent study. Our audit identified at a sole site, the learning agreements or the independent study agreements that were not adequately signed. And so there's 3 required signatures. We identified a number that weren't signed. There's 3 required signatures, as I noted, and some weren't signed by the appropriate personnel. And as a result, we had to quantify that number and determine what the impact was to the district. If you look at that finding also, you'll note that from a financial perspective, it doesn't impact you because you're being funded off of a higher ADA total. So the impact in the current year was that you have a state compliance finding, but you don't have a penalty associated with it. As with all findings that have a financial implication, you have the opportunity to submit a waiver to the Educational Audit Appeals Panel. And if the district certainly chooses to do that, I'd be happy to provide my assistance.
Jenny, could you do us a favor and stop screen sharing? Thank you. Now I can see everyone a little bit better. Thank you, Jenny. Questions, others that anyone has? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, it does look like you have a pretty good, as usual, audit. Thank you, Royce. Unmodified in all those categories. That looks really good.
Well, it's not my report again, it's yours. So, congratulate yourself.
Well, and we're congratulating Jenny.
Okay. Perfect. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. Be safe up there, and we'll see you all soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Royce.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Royce.
Be well.
All right. Our second item is current climate of school bonds and interest in a 2024 bond measure. Jenny Haberlin.
Hi again. Okay, we have Adam Bauer joining us today, and we have a PowerPoint for you as well. And welcome, Adam. I know you've spoken to in front of our board several times. We do have, I think, one new member that you might not have met before, and that was Mr. Kraft, trustee area 4. And Bill, I'm not sure if you were on the board the last time Adam has spoke, but if not, Mr. Mellinger, our board president. So Adam's been a longtime partner and help to our district. And so thank you for joining us. I do have your PowerPoint. I can share my screen if you would like, Adam.
Yes, please. And once again, like the last gentleman, thank you for accommodating. My wife was getting a little worried about me managing all that snow.
It's beautiful up here.
It is beautiful, and we love the mountains. I'm going skiing with my son on Sunday, so I definitely love it. But my wife was a little nervous, to be honest. But thank you. So the role that I serve for you, or our firm serves, is we serve as your municipal advisor. That's a regulated term now. We used to be known as financial advisors. And our role is we have a fiduciary duty to represent you on bond transactions. And that usually involves a lot of planning and things like what we're talking about this evening. And so what we've looked at here, and I'm going to show you some slides towards the end, is when you have a presidential cycle, it generally is favorable for school districts that are looking to do general obligation bonds. And that, coupled with the need that you have and you've had for a long time, I think makes it worth considering moving forward, or at least looking at doing a general obligation bond this year. And so that's what you see there is with the title, is we look at some of your outstanding debt, because it's I think unreasonable to put something in front of the voters if we're not also taking a look at what you've already done in the past. And so we've laid some of that out, or all of that out here. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. One of the most important factors when looking at a general obligation bond measure is your assessed value. This assessed value, it's what the assessor uses to tax your community. This is not market value. Market value is generally much higher because of Prop 13, where it limits the annual increase. And so if a home doesn't turn over and there's been a lot of increases in sales, that home oftentimes has an assessed value much lower than the assessed value is much lower than the current market values. And so when you look at this side, the other thing is, like, your district office, so at least the portion that's used for district services, that's not included in the assessed value. That gets a 0. You're considered exempt. But the grocery store just down the street, that's commercial, that gets captured in here, and all those residential homes gets captured in here. And so when you look at your assessed value, you've really been, you see those all those increases there from years 2002 on. That looks really good. And then while it hurt Rim of the World during the downturn and that Great Recession, your assessed value hung in there a lot better than a lot of your neighboring districts. So when you went down the mountain, we saw 20% declines.
Wow.
And so you have a resilient assessed value. That's really important to me, because it really helps me advocate on your behalf when we meet with the rating agencies. I can say, even during the Great Recession, we lost 5.5%. And in San Bernardino in the Riverside Inland Empire area, that's a very low number. Another thing that's I think jumps out at me about your assessed value is that work from anywhere has benefited you. And I know that. I've heard about the Airbnbs. I know what you're dealing with up there. And so while there's certainly been some things that have made it challenging, it also is your tax base has increased. And so that those new homes that have sold at record prices, they would be taking on a greater share of the burden than that home would have previously. So a 9.06% increase is very high. Another thing I want to show you is every district has an assessed value, or I'm sorry, has a statutory bonding capacity. And you only get access to that, though, when you ask voters to access it and they approve it. And so that bottom table there shows your assessed value of 8.4 billion. That's actually pretty high. And then since you're unified district, you get the 2.5 factor. Union districts get 1.25. And so your gross statutory bonding capacity is 211 million. Like I said, you can't get access to that unless you have voter approval. Another thing I want to point out to you is you have only issued a fraction of that. You have 17.7 million outstanding. When I see a district that has 211 million in statutory bonding capacity, but has 193 million remaining, you have a very compelling story for your community that you haven't asked for much from them. And compared to a lot of other districts, there are districts that must get a waiver from the state to exceed their statutory bonding capacity. I'm actually working with 2 of those districts now. And so the idea that you haven't even, I mean, you can see those numbers. You can crunch the percentage of what 17 million is of 211, but it's a relatively low number, especially considering some districts actually have to exceed that number. I'm kind of dwelling on this for a moment because I think it's so important for you as you're considering this to understand that you've done a lot with what you have, and you haven't asked the community for that much in the way of bonding capacity. So go to the next slide, please. So here's what Measure W has done for you. When in 2008, so 2008 was like 2024 in that it was a presidential cycle. 2008, though, was one of the best for school districts ever. You had a very charismatic presidential candidate that was, young and brought out folks that maybe didn't even own homes. And so generally there was a real level of high support for school district GO bonds. And that was what became President Barack Obama. And then so that you had a 61.62% passage rate. You can see there you had a 23.2 million in authorization. And then you can see as you issued there, you had a targeted tax rate there of that red line, and you're slightly over that. So your assessed value did not grow quite as fast as that financing team had originally projected, but it's within the range that is not too alarming. We have some districts that are very far over that. But the most important thing is not being over that orangish line there. That's where you would be over the original projections from the bond measure. So at 14.96, you're a little bit over that, but if you keep getting those 9% growth factors, that one will come right back in line. And so so the other thing I'd want to point out is that going from 2008 to 2024, that's a pretty long gap between GO bond measures. These Prop 39 GO bond measures are set up with these tax rate limitations. And what that oftentimes requires is that districts go out more frequently. We have some districts that are managing 3 GO bond measures at once. So they haven't even issued all the bonds, but they recognize the limitations of that measure, and they've gone out and gotten additional GO bond measures along the way. And so the fact that you've issued all your bonds, it's done. You haven't done it since 2008 as far as having an approval, shows that you've, like I said, gone a long time since you've had a new GO bond measure that actually shows up on the tax rolls. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This slide I think is important for you to understand. It's the same data as the last one, shown a different way. This data is when you issue debt, when it matures, but there's a column to the far right that I want you to focus on. It says next call date. A call date is when you're allowed to repay these bonds. It's just like how we refinance our home. Although when you're running millions of dollars, you don't just get to refinance it a month later. In the municipal market, you typically allow about 10 years where you don't refinance. And so that's where investors can and underwriters can line up a lot of investors and know that it's safe and not going to get called away from them so shortly. But the point that I want to make to you is you don't have any dates that are in the near future that we could actually do refinancing. And that's because you as a district staff and as a board have refinanced these any chance that you could. That's important because the district itself gets no direct benefit from that. The only parties that get benefits from those refundings are the taxpayers. And so that, I think you've done a good job making sure that you've maintained fiscal prudence and to the benefit of those taxpayers. So that's slide 4. If we go to slide 5, please. Here's another thing. You probably would have guessed this by what I showed you on your statutory bonding capacity, how little of that you have issued. And so these are the San Bernardino County school districts. And I want you to, there's an important district there, third from the bottom, that you probably recognize, highlighted in green there. And that's your district, you're well below those other numbers. There's an orange or peach bar there I want to show you right in the middle. That is a hypothetical district, the median district within San Bernardino County that we've made up. So that one would land right there. And you can see how much lower you are from that. And how far you are from some of the ones that have, really gone up. So let's just say you were able to go for a $60 measure. That would take you up to the 74. That would put you right around where Rialto is. So if you went for the maximum amount that you could consider, but still well below that of a few others. Generally, San Bernardino has pretty low tax rates. And it's also an area where it generally has lower assessed value. So it's an area that's a little bit tougher to do this. You have a pretty conservative base. And so what we see here are generally some lower tax rates than in some other places. So if we can go to slide 6, please. Since I didn't dwell on it enough, we decided to add a slide. And this is how much you are of your statutory bonding capacity. You're not third to the lowest this time, you're fourth to the lowest. So you're still on that very, very low end. Oh, it looks like Mr. Kraft has a question.
What are the reasons why you would think that Bear Valley, because I know they're a municipality, I mean, they're incorporated now, and Mountain View and Toronto, what's the reason why they would be so much lower?
Same reason as you. You're in that category. Is that you just haven't asked and your voters haven't supported as much as some of the other districts. You have a pretty conservative base there. I'm telling you something and you have a retirement group that might not see as much benefit to a geo bond as a parent would. And so it's a little more difficult for you than others. And I think you see, I don't know much about the Trona, but Bear Valley is probably in the same boat. Does that help? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll quit dwelling on that issue. So slide 7. So we looked here, as you said, what if we went for a $20 per $100,000 tax rate? What would that generate for us? And one of the things we want you to do is not issue all the bonds at once. There's a few reasons for that. One is if you get it wrong, and wrong is usually that you're over your tax rate. In that situation, then you're never able to fix it. They're never able to come back and make adjustments, and you're kind of permanently over your tax rate. The second thing is the IRS, the bonds that you get to sell, investors don't have to pay income taxes on the interest, both federal and state. And so they lend money at a lower rate to you than they would another entity that doesn't have that benefit. But the IRS says, we don't want you loading up on bonds and letting these investors not pay taxes if you're not going to spend the money. We want that money, sticks in the air. And so that's what this does, is it tries to line up with that spend down schedule, but also give you opportunities to recalibrate along the way. So this chart here in the top tax rate per 1,000 on the vertical column, years on the horizontal column. Well, you probably notice the Series A goes all the way up to those red lines, and then it drops down in 2028. So drop down to my table below. What you probably notice is we want to issue bonds in 2027. And so what we did was we left tax rate capacity to issue bonds down the road. Now, let's say something really bad happens up there and assessed value drops by 15 or 20%. Then what we do is in 2027, we don't issue that full 12 million. We ratchet it down because now we want to maintain that tax rate that we promised your voters. And so that's what this does is every 3 years, we get this ability to ratchet either up or down. Hopefully our assumptions are conservative and you're able to issue a little bit more than I'm showing you here. We try to make it so that we're issuing a little bit more, a little bit sooner than our projections are set up for. And so you can see here. Another thing I want to point out to you is there's no capital appreciation bonds here. And so that's where these bonds, you pay interest immediately, you don't defer the interest. And that's one thing that drew a lot of criticism out there was districts that went out for capital appreciation bonds. Yours has 0 built into that. So you're issuing bonds that work a lot like your home mortgage. Once that loan closes, the taxpayers start repaying the interest. Now, I have a lot of slides that look just like this, but have different numbers on them. So I'm going to go through those very quickly. So if we can go to slide 8, looks the same, but now we have a 30 up top, and you see we get to 71 million. So we go to the next slide. Now let's just go to about 3 slides forward. One more. Here it all is summarized. 20 through 60. You get par amount, that's the amount we're actually asking for an authorization. Project amount, you have to pay costs to do the financings. You can see for a $20 tax rate, we're looking at 46 million in projects, for a 60 at 140, and you can see what that looks like with all some of these other factors. And so if we go to and by the way, I don't have an answer for you on whether we should do 20 or 60 or anywhere in between. One of the things we're going to ask you to consider this evening is to do a survey of your community. And that survey is going to give us some information about how your community feels about things. So for example, they're going to ask about tax rates, but not just tax rates. They're going to ask things like, how do you feel about improving school facilities? How do you feel about safety? How do you feel about roads? And then they're going to ask, how do you feel about property tax increases? And what we're trying to do is gauge if the community their heightened alert is tax increases, if that's more important than school facilities, well, we know we have to be very sensitive on the tax rate. But if they say school facilities are number 1 and not increasing taxes is number 50, and by the way, we never see that contrast, but let's just say we did. I'm exaggerating to make a point. Then we know we can err towards that 60 number. But then there's another section that says, let's start high and work low. And let's see where your community, how elastic your community is on that. And so we go at it several different ways to try to gauge how much your community will support. So anyway, this is the bookends and some of the books in the middle, but we're just trying to give you a gauge of how much you can raise with a GeoBond measure. Trustee Ridlin has a question.
Deanna, go ahead.
Curious about this slide on the bond scenarios, just in terms of the numbers aren't proportional. Is it just, is the overhead pretty much static as we go from 20 to 40 to 60? Because it seems like the numbers don't completely match up.
They're not completely static. There's some consultants that are percentage based, and then like mine's fixed. So the smaller the transaction, the greater percentage mine is of the transaction. And there's several like that. So it's not perfectly linear.
Thank you.
So if we go to the next slide, what I'm trying to give here is some history. So you last went in 2008. So if you go pretty far to the left, you'll see a green dot that says 91%. That was the high for that time. And you can see that until 2016, another presidential cycle. Well, let me take a step back. Generally, look at all the green dots. green dots tell you two things. That was a presidential, general election. Also, what I'm hoping you notice is whatever the trend was before that election cycle, school districts did better at that presidential cycle than they did previously. So you kind of see that bump upward. March of 20, there's a lot of unfortunate things that happened that cycle. One is you had a Prop 13 on the ballot, which confused everybody. You had a state bond on the ballot that failed. I don't think we've ever seen that before. And then COVID hit in February. We didn't all realize it, but a lot of people knew something was going on. And the other thing is the stock market tanked just before that election cycle. So there was a lot of things that made that one an anomaly. But you can see then in November of 20, look how high that passage rate is. But I want to caution you on that. If you went to the ballot in November of 2020, you pretty much started 5 years earlier, because nobody went on in 11/20 on a whim. You didn't have kids in school. Those who did open up had 3 hours of public comments telling us, the state's crazy and we should have people in school or not, or we can't believe you'd ever consider going back to school. It was a very divisive period. So my point is, if you went on in November of 20, you were well prepared. So that 80% is probably higher than what it would be otherwise. And then you see we settle back in that 70% range for the last few. So what we're hopeful for is that the cycle in 24 will see one of those green dots and have it upward again. So just trying to give you some history here. So next slide, please. This is the process. And we've improved this slide since I showed it to you last time. We tried to slim it down. So there's this feasibility phase, and that's all these things I say to you, I can't tell you today. We need to get a survey, and we need to be able to start gauging how your community feels about things. And then we start settling in on all the things that fall into that blue number 1 feasibility study. Then we transition into this build consensus and build a strong measure. And then finally, you've called for the election, and then now it's on the ballot and it switches to an advocacy type approach. Some deadlines there at the very bottom is for March of 24, our deadline is December 8, 2023 to put on. But think about that. That puts you just after CSBA. Then you back up from that and you have Thanksgiving. Our deadline really is late October, early November for that one. Then you have the November of 24, and you just put it on by August. And generally, school districts call for the measure in June of that summer. I think November is going to be the cycle that works best for you. But I think planning for being ready to go in March, if that proves to be the best one, would be good, because having more time is a lot easier than being crunched. And so right now, taking a look at things, you have both paths that you can consider. But I think in the back of our minds, we're probably all thinking November. But if, let's say there's a really controversial things that start showing up on a November ballot, if we're planning now, we have the possibility that we could still look at March. But like I said, I think November will be it, but starting now gives you some optionality there. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So what we're looking for this evening is that first step of doing a survey. And that you don't want me doing your survey. I'm biased. I've been working with you a long time. I want this for you. I love doing the bond work. We want someone and I'm not a statistician. You want a statistician that comes in, gives you a no decision. And if it's a go decision, here's the things that you need to be considerate of. And that would be the first step. You pay them, they're done. We can call them for advice along the way, but they have no vested interest in this. So that would be that step 1, is to get an independent survey and then allow us to take a look and get a feel for how your community feels about things. So I've covered a lot of ground, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Go ahead, Dana.
So we've just we're still reeling from the storms that hit our community, and that'll be something that will be an ongoing, definite concern in the months ahead. And also, just as a country right now, we're definitely being affected by inflation and rising costs. So historically, is there any kind of data? Do you have any sense as to how events like what we've experienced on the mountain, combined with what's happening just financially, how that might impact people's openness to passing a bond?
So we haven't seen inflation like this since the early 80s. Prop 39 was passed in 2001. So we've never seen that correlation, how those two are going to sync up. But that is a national issue, and it's not showing up in the surveys right now. That we haven't seen an adjustment for that. But you raised a good point. We do not want to be in the field when people are still driving by 6 feet of snow and dealing with ice dams and everything else. Point well taken. So I had not thought of that till you brought that up. So thank you. So I think that we might want to get this process started and get a survey drafted, but not get in the field until we feel like, someone can actually call a roofer, get them out there, get that roof cleared. And I don't know if that's May. Generally, I could get these done before we let school out, because once you let school out, your sample base gets wonky, right? Who's around, who's not around. So let's not do it first 2 weeks of April, but look at that May timeframe for consideration.
So even without snow being on the ground in the Crestline community, it will be without a grocery store for probably minimum close to a year. So it isn't just a matter of having the visual of having, snow and berms and the like around. It's also not having a local grocery store and families having to contend with that. Is that something we should also be considering?
And that's the one with the roof that caved in?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's one thing the survey helps us with. Because like the way we're talking about right now, we both say, well, that's harmful, that's concerning. But you also might look up and say, the community also might look up and say, we need things up here and we don't want the school district roofs to cave in. And if we don't take care of that, hopefully we don't have atmospheric rivers next year in this. But what if we do? So that might, as much as it hurts, that might actually help. We don't know the answer to that until we get a survey.
Thank you.
Other questions, everybody? How do we determine who we do a survey with?
That's on the board agenda. Sorry, Adam. That's a contract is on the action calendar tonight.
And I'll talk to you a little bit about why that firm's done it for you in the past, and it has done a lot of Riverside and San Bernardino and Orange County districts. These areas are harder to pass geo bonds than others. And the one thing I like about Dr. McClarney is he doesn't give us a rosy picture. I've had consultants that I've worked with for 20 something years, and they've never told me not to have a district move forward. How is that possible? Right. So Dr. McClarney has told us you should not go this cycle. And I find that to be very valuable. The other thing is he's plain spoken, which a PhD in statistics, sometimes that's hard to find. And so he breaks it down and keeps it the way I think all of us want to hear it. Like I attempt to do with finance, hopefully I did. But he does that with statistical research. And that's why I think he's a good firm. All their costs are about the same because they have to sub it out. A good portion of the research part gets contracted out. And so they have their piece of their designing the survey and organizing it, doing a presentation. And that's not that much different. They're all going to be about the same cost. And so I think he would really suit you well. The other thing is we can do with him is track your prior survey and see what's changed in the community since then. That's one of my favorite slides that these firms do at times, is show what's changed over time.
Because we failed last time.
You did.
And he recommended we move forward, right?
That's right.
And so I'd be interested in that comparison too.
I assume there's a lot of lessons learned from the March 2020 bond results statewide. You saw in that historical graph how unprecedented it was. So I'm sure, I'm very curious to what the survey folks have learned from that as well.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So there's a party that we're gonna have to work with at some point called a communication consultant. And they know we have the Super Bowl of elections coming up because there's so much pent up demand for school district geo bonds because you've had lesson 20 and lesson 22. And so I think we're going to break that 2016 record. So they're going to try to split their work up between March and November, right? That's just a natural instinct for them to do. What I think I want this group to be able to do is if March is so compelling, we should do it. Let's be open to it. But let's not do March to help another consultant split up their work, right? Just because we're more compelling than someone else, they say, I want to get RIM off my plate and see if we can get March. We should always circle back this group and make sure that we're all comfortable with that. And if we're doing that, we know exactly why we're doing it, not to do, like I said, workload allocation.
And Adam, how will we know that?
That survey is going to help. That survey, I think that survey is going to help a lot because it takes a sample of both those electorates. But the problem is you can't know for sure, right? Because it's a snapshot in time. But we're going to try to make educated guesses, educated decisions to decide.
Go ahead, Dana.
All right, this might be a little bit of an off-the-wall question, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask this. In our communities, we have a lot of short-term rentals. So we have a lot of non-resident property owners who would also not be participating in the vote. And we also have a significant number of people on fixed incomes who are residents, or also very low income who are also residents. Is there any way to structure a bond initiative such that if there are people that are in a real difficult financial situation, fixed income, not very little discretionary funds, if any, is there any way to somehow structure it such that there might also be forgiveness or a way to be able to adjust based on property owners' life situation?
The direct answer to that is no. But if you have like a retirement community, like what was Leisure World, I don't know what to change the name to now, but if you have something like that, and you know the specific area, we could do something called a school facility improvement district, and you can carve that area out. But on a one house in a neighborhood, no, you can't.
Okay, thanks.
The more I think about this grocery store example, the more my attitude has changed. My initial reaction to that was, oh no, that's terrible for us. And it's terrible for the community. I don't want to make light of it. But as far as the community understanding the need to improve facilities, I just think that's a glaring light on that issue.
Well, to add to it, frankly, our superintendent, our school district behaved just phenomenally in terms of really pulling through for the community, especially at the height of the storm. And it was our facilities that were being used time and time again and probably saved lives. So there's an absolute need to make sure our facilities are ready to handle whatever when Mother Nature throws at us.
Your CBO had shared that with me. I had forgotten before this meeting, but that absolutely is a positive. You have some really good momentum going into this. Still a long ways away, but yeah, you do have some good momentum going into this.
Any other questions from anyone?
I wish I could see you in person. Thank you for taking the time. I will be up there many times if we move forward with this process, and I look forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you, Adam. Dr. Fricker, anything else?
No, I think it was pretty well covered, and I'm kind of somewhat optimistic in the process and kind of where our district is sitting. And I do think that the recent storm has shed a light on really what buildings and infrastructure we have up here that is so needed and necessary. So I'm hopeful.
And once we review the survey, that will give us better insight into what we think the numbers we might actually go for, Adam.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Adam. And we do look forward to being in person.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
And with that, we are going to switch speakers to Educational Services, LCAP Advisory Committee's Input Report. Heather Dominguez, Director of Educational Service. Welcome, Heather.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to need to share my screen. So am I set up to do that, Mark? Let's see.
Yes, down at the bottom.
Okay, can everybody see that? All right, this will be a new thing for me. So tonight I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to do this on Zoom because I have a lot of handouts and things that are all printed nicely in my office, ready to distribute to everyone tonight, but that's not going to happen. So that they are in your board folder. So I had Mark put all of the documents that I'm going to be referencing as well as the PowerPoint in the board documents folder. Because a lot of them are text heavy. And so to try to put them on a PowerPoint is a little challenging. So we'll just reference them, and I'm not going to read all of them to you because we would be here a very long time. But you do
You can go ahead and put that in presentation mode and actually that we get the full screen. There you go.
Like that?
Yes, much better.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Very good. All right, so tonight I'm going to share some information and give you a mid-year update on where we are with our current LCAP implementation, as well as some feedback from our educational partners. So just a little context to remind us that the dashboard does inform the development of our LCAP. So the dashboard is intended to identify the LEA's areas of strength or areas of need. And then we have local data that we look at as well, which provides us additional decision-making information. And then the LCAP is our vehicle that we use to review our progress, articulate our plan, address areas of identified need, and communicate that to our educational stakeholders. And our ultimate goal would be to improve our student outcomes. This is the agenda that we've been following this year for our educational partner, sort of our official meetings. We also collect information from other educational partners, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But these are sort of the meetings that we've deemed officially as our input meetings. Our first one was held in December 1st of 2022. We had one in January and February, and unfortunately we had to cancel the one in March due to the snow closure. We have one more scheduled in April. We'll kind of have to combine the responding to needs and getting feedback and input. We've already started the feedback and input component though. And then May 31st is when I need to have a draft of the LCAP document for our educational partners to view. And then June 8th is our public hearing at the board meeting. And then we will go June 22nd is when it will be presented to the board for approval. This is a document that I shared with our educational partners in terms of our dashboard results. If you recall back at the State of the District report, the dashboard does not have color indicators this year because we don't have comparison data. In order to have the colors, we have to have at least 2 years worth of data to compare to show not only our status, but also our change over time. And so this just demonstrates each of the different student groups along the left side. These are the student groups that are looked at for differentiated assistance or comprehensive support and improvement for the school sites or targeted support at the school sites. So this is our district report. I also have this information for each of our school sites, which I'm going to be sharing with our principals. We have been identified for differentiated assistance because of varying different performance levels for English learners, foster youth, homeless, and our students with disabilities, primarily based on chronic absenteeism. I was in a webinar today, and across the state, the highest levels of identification for differentiated assistance is based on chronic absenteeism and suspension rates, which, you know, were directly impacted by coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is some information about our schools in terms of what their identification is related to comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI, or targeted intervention, or ATSI. And the reason I bring this point up is because in our LCAP, we do have to come up with strategies to support our CSI schools. And then our ATSI schools and CSI schools have to identify strategies within their SIPSA to address their areas of identification. I thought it was interesting. There were 6,200 schools eligible across the state for ATSI, which is identification based on student groups. So just to kind of give you an idea that all schools across the state of California are designated with one of three designations, either general, which means they are not in any sort of comprehensive support system. They're designated as general, not in support CSI or ATSI. CSI are for schools who are identified because of school-wide low performance. And ATSI are schools that are identified because of a particular student group that was identified for low performance. So this chart represents our schools within RIM. And I referenced also that, you know, the CSI and ATSI schools must address strategies in their SIPSA. And for CSI, we also have to identify them in the LCAP. So CHE was identified as ATSI based on special education. LAE was a general designation, so they are not in any sort of assisted support designation. VOE, ATSI based on SPED, special education, as well as the Hispanic student group. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. MPH had been identified previously for English learners, but exited from English learner status, which was positive, but then were identified for SPED and for low socioeconomic. Mountain High School is in CSI, as is RVA. So we have 2 schools identified for CSI, and we have 3 in ATSI, and then RIM High School, general, they are not identified for any sort of intervention. Back to our input from our educational partners, just a reminder that the 23-24 school year will be the last year in this LCAP 3-year cycle. So we are in year 2 of this particular LCAP cycle. Last year we'll conclude that cycle, and we'll be writing a new LCAP for the beginning in the 24-25 school year. Other opportunities that we've had to get input from our educational partner feedback is our principals roundtable. We get feedback from our sites. We've done some official needs assessments with our school sites, our DLAC and our ELAC committees, our school site councils, time with trustees. I know in the past you've provided us some feedback based on things that you're gathering from the folks you're talking to in our community. Our Kelvin pulses, RTA and CSCA negotiations and problem solving sessions, our PTAs, and then our site needs assessments, which we've just gathered all the information from those, and I'll be sharing that with Cabinet. So the first document I had for you in the folder is our metrics, and that document looks like this. I don't know if it's, and the way it is organized is, I tried to kind of set it up like the LCAP is set up. but just not 100 pages. So on the far left, at the top of it, it says LCAP priority 1. You have the metric that we've identified on the far left. The baseline is in the middle, which is what was identified as the baseline when we first wrote the LCAP. The column that's color coded in the maroon is where we are to date on that particular metric. Some of the metrics I'm still gathering information on, and some of them I won't have information until the very end of the school year. So I provided you with what I had available to me currently for where we are. Whoops, what just happened? What did I do? I paused something. How do I unpause it? Your screen is paused.
We can hear you okay.
Yeah, but she's trying to adjust the next picture.
You can't see it. What happened?
Heather, just stop the slideshow and go back to it.
Stop and start over. If at first
Yeah.
you don't succeed, try again.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you, Shannon. Teamwork. Whoops. What is this thing popped up? Get rid of that. Okay. What in the world? There we go.
Maybe it
Okay.
didn't work.
I thanked you too soon, Shannon. No. Okay, so each one of the LCAP priority areas, whoops, I'm just all discombobulated here. There we go. I did based on a color coding. So the maroon is LCAP priority number 1. The blue is LCAP priority number 2, facilitate safe and positive school climate. And the green is engage family and community. So the far right is what we indicated we wanted our outcome to be at the end of this LCAP cycle, which is going to be next year, the year 23-24.
And you don't have those on screen, Heather?
I don't have, I mean, I can put them on screen. I do have them. I can go back. Would that be helpful? I have them queued up.
Were those the files that you emailed us yesterday?
Yes, I emailed those, and I also had Mark include them in your board folder. But I can, would it be helpful if I pulled it up on the screen?
I would say yes, but
Okay, let me, hold on, let me. I've not done this where I've toggled between documents before. Escape. Let me escape. Okay, let me do, here we go. Okay, and now let me go back here. So I got to talk myself through this. Share. Make this bigger. There, can you see that?
yes.
So there's several, parts to this. So like I said, the metric on the left side is what we are using to measure. The baseline is where we were at the beginning of this LCAP cycle. The annual update is where we are based on our most current information or our most current data. And the far right is the desired outcome of where we would like to be at the end of this cycle. So this goes through all of the metrics that we've identified in the LCAP. So I took these directly from the LCAP. So these are just all of the metrics for, this is all from goal 1. The blue is goal 2. And then the green is for goal 3. So do you want me to go into detail about I'm hesitant. I didn't want to just read this to you because I figured you'd have it accessible to you, but I mean, we can go over each one if we need to do that.
No,
But I also,
I read this today.
Okay.
I read the
Okay.
entire document today, so I mean, it's definitely the information that we have been going throughout the year in terms of where we're at and where we want to go. So this, you know,
okay.
that's my personal opinion. I don't.
All right, let me come back here then. So the next document, I'll just actually go to the next document. The next document is, well, let me move this down here. Right here, okay. So this is laid out very similarly, where these are all of the actions and services that we have identified in our LCAP in terms of the actions that we're putting into place. So again, the maroon is all of priority 1. The action is listed on the left, and then a description of where we are in the implementation of that action is on the right. So these are all of the, this is the 21 actions that we've identified for priority area 1. Then we have the priority area 2, all of our actions and services identified for that particular priority. And then the same for priority 3. The action on the left, where we are in implementation on the right. So these are meant to be resources as you have your discussion tonight as a board, just kind of where we are in the process of our LCAP at this point in the year. Okay. All right, so let me go back here and here. So one of the things that we would, we've been talking about is we want to optimize student achievement. And how do we get better at messaging and implementing the actions and services that we have already identified in the LCAP? So much of the conversation with our educational partners has been around our dashboard, which our dashboard is very heavy on standardized testing. And our outcomes for our ELA and math CAS, as well as our absenteeism and our suspension rates. Those have been low performance areas for us. And so the educational partner feedback documents that you have, there's one document that provides information from the student perspective. I've had LCAP stakeholder meetings with just kids. I had about 12 kids that have come to 2 of our meetings. And I just love meeting with the kids because they're very insightful and they're very honest. And give really valuable feedback. And it was a representation, I said, I want a representation of our students across the school. I don't want just all the ASB kids or just all, I want some EL kids and some kids that are special education and some kids who are, maybe low SES. How do we have a mixture of our kids to really represent the school as a whole? So I have the input that they have provided, as well as the educational partner community members. Hasn't been really well attended. I'll be honest about that. We've had about 4 people at that meeting that are very faithful. They come every single time and always give very, valuable and thoughtful feedback. So they're my faithful 4, I call them. But it has been limited in terms of participation in those particular meetings. So but being better about messaging what's in our LCAP and messaging to our community the importance of those assessments. We have a high number of students who opt out of standardized testing, which negatively impacts, I think, our results. And just sort of our testing climate in terms of preparing for it and effectively messaging it out to our community on how it impacts us, those results. So, and then just this reminder of what the LCAP is meant to be. It's meant to be our plan, do, study, act cycle, where we plan. The LCAP is our plan. we do the things that are in the LCAP, then we look at the metrics and the data to see if it's working, and then we have to act and make adjustments accordingly. And so that's what I have for you this evening in terms of some resources for your board LCAP conversation.
Thank you, Heather. Which is now where we move to. Point 10, discussion information items.
Wait a second, Bill.
Jordan has her hand up. Georgiana has her hand up.
Go ahead, Deanna.
First, I have a couple questions, Heather. I really love getting this information yesterday. It was really, really helpful. Just want to confirm that as far as the student input, those were all REM high school students. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then-
Mostly juniors and seniors.
Okay, cool. And then on one of the documents, the LCAP Priority 1, increased student learning and support professional development. Just wondering, looking at the 21-22 DF rates, have we ever had any kind of look at our DF rates and how they might correlate with how students have performed on standardized testing, or looked at standardized testing results and taken a look at if they correlate to DNF rates?
I know those are conversations that the high school has had with their leadership team, particularly just looking at, is there a correlation between those two? And there does seem to be some mismatch there.
Clarifying on that comment, Heather, what do you mean in mismatch?
Sometimes the grades that the students are receiving are not representative of how they're performing on the CASP. That was one of the reasons we wanted to shift to STAR, the STAR assessment that we utilized across all levels, because it does have a universal scale, which is meant to have a correlation between their performance on that particular assessment and their CASP performance. And as we looked at our third grade results, it's very, very closely correlated between how they perform on that STAR assessment and how they performed on the CASP. But we don't see that same correlation necessarily with how they're performing on their grades in comparison to how they perform on the CASP.
You had something else, I think, Cindy, also, didn't you?
Yes, but I was waiting my turn to be called on.
Well, go for it.
So a couple questions. You said that you get the feedback from the PTA. Is it how is that organized?
It's more through the sites. So the sites gather feedback from their organizations, and then we did a needs assessment with each one of the sites, where the sites provided feedback on a variety of categories, from facilities to educational services to special services to business. And then the sites surveyed their school site councils, their DLACs, and their PTAs, and then that information they've generated from PTA meetings or from school site council meetings or from DLAC meetings were incorporated into their needs assessment.
Okay, so I have a question. Is it, when you say surveyed, is it something that the district has typed up like a survey that went out to PTA members that is then collected, or is it left up to each site to collect that information from a PTA meeting?
There was a template that was created with pluses and deltas, we called it, in each of the different departments. And then each of those educational partner groups provided feedback at the site level to the site administrator. And then that information was compiled for each site. And then it was broken down by each department.
Mm.
But it wasn't like a survey that went out to everybody. It was not in that manner, no.
Okay, we can have a conversation later about that and how that went. Then the next thing is, I know that we struggle every year with the participation in the LCAP meetings, not so much from our students, but from parents, community members, that kind of, and I know it's a struggle. Not just for our school district. The whole LCAP participation as a whole can be challenging. So is that something that I know we regroup and we say, okay, we're going to regroup and tackle this participation issue. What can we do? And I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but what can we do differently that enables us to have more than 4 people participating? I'm super happy that the students have outpaced everybody else every single year. It makes my heart happy that they're so willing to step up and give their opinions. I think it's interesting that their opinions from year to year are pretty consistent in their feedback, even with different students on the LCAP. So I think that becomes to me interesting data to see the same types of response every year from the student group. Also, even though there's limited parents, the same thing. I think it's interesting that the feedback in certain areas is the same, in terms of including parents more and engaging parents more at the school sites. So I think that's interesting. But I guess, in the back of our minds, how do we do something differently to encourage that participation from parents and the community members? That's a question to dwell on. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. We just have to start doing something a little bit differently. What that is, I don't know. I tend to, whenever I see a participation issue from a PTA standpoint, I'm like, let's throw some food at it. And I know that's not, let me just feed everybody over this, like, it's going to be Taco Tuesday and come and we'll throw babysitting and here we go. So that is my go-to, is just food and fun and yada, yada, yada. So not that I'm saying that's what we should do. I'm just saying that what are other districts doing? I mean, they all are struggling, not all of them, but there's so many that are struggling with participation in what's supposed to be a big, huge deal about the LCAP.
Well, it's funny because the kids actually, because they were saying we had some ideas about things to do with their parents. And so we talked about, well, what do you think would be, I said, we don't have a lot of parents that come to some of the things and so we started talking about that. And then they were identifying, well, my parents don't get home until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, or we have baseball practice afterwards, or I'm home with the kids because my mom's working a night shift. And so it became, as the kids started talking about it, they almost came around to, oh yeah, this is really challenging because there's so many different factors about trying to get, and then we've talked about, doing it virtually. So I don't know the answer either, but if we can figure it out, I think it would be fabulous.
I mean, some school districts have combined LCAP with an event or something
Well, the kids talked about like homework certificates, or if the parents are coming to see something that their kids are doing, like a performance then they would probably be more apt to be a participant if their students were. So figuring, yeah. And like I say, we could brainstorm all night long, and I don't know the answer either, but I think that it's worthy of a conversation of how we can bring those numbers up.
And then one last question in terms of sharing data. Is it encouraged that we share data with our PTAs so that there's an actual conversation that happens? I know that, like, being on PTA with Josh Hill and Catherine Obregon as principals, just throwing Ken DeCrew, data would be presented to parent PTAs. Not overwhelming, we don't want to scare people off, but just like, do we encourage principals to do that so that parents that you're going to have an idea of what they're talking about? Like, is CAS presented? Oh, Mrs. Whiteside. Sorry, Mrs. Whiteside, if you're listening, I know you've done it. So.
Yeah, to be honest with you, each principal probably does. I'm not sure that they do have a focus on data in terms of their PTA. I think it's more activities focused and not necessarily but I think whenever we can share our data with whatever groups we have is helpful, because I think the more, even the kids, when I presented the dashboard to the kids, they were like, oh, wow, that's I called it our district report card. I said, this is our district report card. And they were like, oh, I don't know that, I think we need a better report card than that. And so what do we need to do? And we need to tell the kids about this. The kids need to know that when they take that test, that those scores show up on this report card that's published out to it was like that messaging piece, I think, is so important. So that if we have an elevator speech, or if we have a common message and a common data set that we're sharing out collectively, so that we have an understanding of why these things are important and what the dashboard is even made of and how it's utilized. And that messaging piece is really important. And if we're all doing it, the same message, that can be really powerful.
It's really more than CASP though, isn't it, Heather? I mean,
yeah.
So it's the DEF, it's the suspension rates and all. I mean, there's a lot of things, the reading and math scores, there's a lot more to it than the CASP.
Well, and when you look at our chronic absenteeism rate, and if our kids aren't coming to school, I mean, that's a huge concern. So, and
it was interesting, just as if additional data, I'm just going to give one example. So other principals, if you're listening, I'm not dissing on you. I'm just giving one example from the past. Catherine Obergon, principal at Rim High School, she presented more than CASP. And it generated interesting conversations about, especially attendance and chronic absenteeism. She started thinking outside of the box in terms of ways that we could capture attendance. And so like when PTA put together the SAT study sessions, because we brought a professional company to come and do SAT, Catherine's like, oh, we can capture this because it's SAT, it's tutoring, it's this. And it's like she started creating outside of the box opportunities to capture attendance. And I just thought that was super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my brain's CASP heavy right now because we start CASP testing when we come back in the spring. So that's why my brain is a little bit CASP disproportional right now.
So let me ask you to try to shift your brain a little bit. What areas are of greatest concern to you as the Director of Educational Services, as you look at the whole dashboard? What areas are of greatest concern to you?
I think our absenteeism rate is huge, because if they're not in school, they're not able to learn. And then looking at our instructional program in terms of our daily, our pacing and aligning our pacing and our assessments, I think right now is a big focus for next school year.
And Heather, which strategies do you think are working the best? We've got all these different things that we're talking about and trying to do. Some are little, some are big. Which strategies do you think are working the best? Particularly, I'm concerned also about the absenteeism. If they're not in school, that's going to really hinder their education. But what strategies are working from your perspective?
Wow, that's a really tough question. I think that what happens every single day in classrooms between teachers and students is really where the rubber meets the road. And so the relationships that our teachers have with their students, and that, sticking to the essential standards and that focus is what will be successful, is if we can have aligned instructional plans that are aligned to our standards, that are assessed periodically to see how students are progressing towards meeting those standards, and then adjusting our instruction based on what we're seeing the kids are either getting or not getting. So I think reinforcing the PLC cycle and getting better at doing that cycle, where we're looking at what we're expecting our kids to know and be able to do, How do we know that they are doing it? What are we going to do if they aren't able to do those things? And then what about those students who already came in knowing those things? So I think our PLC cycle is very powerful. I think we need to improve in that process. But I think that if we get that down and do that well, I think it'll make a big difference.
So following that question then, because Bill opened that door, so then how do we become better at the PLC? Does that mean professional development, another professional development cycle on effective use of PLC and what to do? Is that somebody we bring in from the outside? Is it internal? Is it observation and kind of by the district and sort of like stepping in to gently direct in how to be more effective? How do you see that playing out? If PLC is where it's at, how does the district support that without getting in the way?
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
Heather, while we have listeners and all, what is PLC?
Oh, professional learning community time, which is our minimum days. So on the days where the students are not coming to school or have a minimum day on Wednesdays, we have 25 of those built within the school calendar. Those days are used for teachers to engage in conversations about the things I was just speaking about. What are we teaching? What are we expecting our kids to know? Are we all on the same page with that? What are we using as our assessment tools to determine that they indeed have learned those things? And then how are we intervening if the kids are not getting, that cycle of conversation? So one of the things is this last year was the first year we've had the same number of PLCs for all schools. In the past, we had a varied number. We had the elementaries had one number of days, the high school only had 7, the middle school had more of them than most of the sites. So there wasn't really any unified number of days that were being utilized for that purpose. So this year we were able to unify that within the calendar. So I think that was very helpful. But then looking at those PLC days and what we're doing with them in terms of opportunities for professional development, our professional development has been very impacted by our lack of substitutes. And we used to be able to do release days where, teachers could go to conferences or we get subs and then they could come together to do some alignment of their instruction. And we haven't been able to do that because of the lack of substitutes. So to your question, Cindy, I think, yes, all of those things are needed in terms of, and structuring our PLC days with what specifically we're going to be doing in professional development as a unified focus. Those are all ways that we can strengthen our PLC and what we should be doing on those days related to the 4 questions of the PLC.
I saw that in the document. What are the 4 essential PLC guiding questions?
Well, the 4 that I just referenced, number 1, what is it that we expect our students to know and be able to do? How do we know that they have learned what we've expected them to learn? So our assessment components. What are we doing if they have not learned it? How are we intervening? And then what if they already knew what we are teaching them? How are we enriching or accelerating those students who already knew what we were teaching? Those are the 4 guiding questions of the PLC.
And how has that helped us to improve reading abilities and math skills? How have the PLCs? Which, by the way, we just had our last one, right?
We did.
Just this Wednesday was our last one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we missed, well, we were in school most of March, so that was a challenge. Well, that's a very, very good question, because we've had our reading scores have been low. And so I think that's where we have improvement to make in that process. Because we have the time set aside, but in terms of the work that we're doing on those PLC days, that's a good question.
Thanks, Heather. And do we evaluate the amount of time that a student reads? I mean, do we have measurements for how much time a student actually reads, like even during the day, how much time is given to reading, and I mean, I'm sure we probably have students in high school who maybe are still challenged with reading abilities. From what even as we look at the dashboard, it would appear that way.
When you say time, you mean like how many hours a day? What do you mean by measuring?
Probably just that, exactly. How much time do I spend reading in a school day?
Heather, I think like in Read Across America, those sheets that go home and the kid, you have to document how many hours you spent that day for Read Across America, something like that, but not like that.
Yeah.
I mean, within our, we don't have like on a daily basis where there's reading logs that say the kids are spending 2 hours a day reading a book. So we do not have a system like that, no.
Just wondering about these things out loud. All
And
right.
then one other question, when you talk about instructional practices and programs as being really important, when we look at professional development opportunities, do we gain insight from our teachers on what would be something that I know MPH has had a lot of UDL, universal design, Bill, universal design learning, but
universal design for learning.
Sorry, I forgot the L. But do we collaborate with teachers and principals about professional development that shores up instructional practices so that the teachers have buy-in and they are like, yes, let's go. These are going to give me the tools for me to, I don't know, provide better EL instruction or better, or just give me more tools to make me excited. Do we collaborate with our teachers and principals about what next piece they are looking for, or what we see?
We do professional development surveys at the end of the year to determine what are the needs for the following year of what the focus would, what they would, before we have a professional development day. We only have the 2 that are built into the school year, which again makes it really challenging. We don't have a lot of built-in, we have 2 PD days that are built into the calendar per year. And then with lack of substitutes and the ability to provide release time to our students, we're looking at other options like summer opportunities to have maybe teachers come in during the summertime and provide my brain is
enrichment.
Not enrichment, but different modules, so that based on what the teachers are indicating they would like to have assistance with, then we can provide some modules, and then they can attend those in the summertime and be paid some extra duty to do those things, since we aren't really able to do it during the school year because of the sub situation, or have not been able to in the last couple of years.
So further on that, I know that districts do kind of that same thing, extra duty pay to attend trainings, whether on maybe a specific topic or whatever. Can we hold that kind of opportunity during the course of the school year, like on a Saturday or something? I know it's hard because our teachers are parents as well, and so they're going to baseball and soccer and gymnastics and all that as well. But I know that other school districts provide those opportunities during the school year with that kind of ability to put in professional development or training or something. I guess I understand the challenge of the sub. So working around that challenge, just doing something different, because we seem to be running into the same problem every year, which is shortage of subs. I mean, just doing NGSS for secondary, we heard of the challenges of progressing that forward. Vertical articulation in certain subjects, we have that challenge. So subs seem to be a very big, huge issue. So how do we do a workaround to offer more opportunities to address areas of concern or areas of need as outlined by teachers and principals and and what we're seeing, and being able to plug those in during the core more frequently.
Mhm. And that's why we're looking at things like a summer institute or because that's what the realization is that our old systems of trying to do these things with sub-release or conference kinds of formats are not working post-COVID. We can't do them that way. And so how can we do them? Either we're holding some more of them, you know, after school on a PLC day, paying extra duty to be able to say, okay, we'll do the NGSS workshop. We'll do it on a Wednesday. The first hour and a half will be under PLC, but if you stay an additional hour and a half, that gives us a 3-hour chunk of time that we'll pay extra duty to extend that time. So those kinds of opportunities of using our PLC time, I think that's what I was alluding to in terms of using it more effectively, is using that time to be a little more creative in providing professional learning opportunities. You know, kind of meet us in the middle. We'll use part of it as the PLC time and part of it is extra duty time. Maybe some summer institutes. You know, Saturdays is also an option, but that is challenging because, like you said, teachers are parents just like, you know, our parents are. But we are having to think outside of the box because we've had barriers and we're to the realization that using subs isn't working. We can't rely on that. We have to use other options.
Heather, you're the educator leading the educators.
Mhm.
We're the board. What do you need from the board to improve some of these areas, particularly the chronic absenteeism, the reading and math? What do you need from the board? Because that's, as you're working on your LCAP strategies, right? We should fit in there somewhere too and be a part of helping improve. So, and if you want to think about that, do.
Yeah, one thing I will tell all of you on the board is I'm not good on the spot. I kind of struggle with that. So I'll leave this meeting and go, oh, I should have said that. I should have said that. I don't do well when I'm put on the spot.
Well, not trying to put you on the spot. I'm really trying to offer what you want from us that would be helpful. So, and
so I'd appreciate some processing time. That would be great.
Great. Dana?
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, even not just in the next couple of days, Heather, if there's things that as a group we might be able to support you with, that you don't have a time limit in getting back to us. Something that comes to mind based on what the student input was, we are struggling with how we can get, we can get people to the LCAP meetings, especially our educational partners. And then also struggling with in terms of engaging, providing the teachers with the professional development. The students had said, have a poll in terms of to find out what food kids actually would like to eat. I'm thinking in terms of having a poll, especially with technology options that are out there, let us as a district employing polling more frequently to try and quickly get feedback from groups for those specific things that we're struggling with. In terms of how, questioning the teachers, in terms of how can we best help you get yourself better, better prepared, or asking our community members, how can we best get your input on these things, whether it is like Cindy mentioned, providing food or locations or whatever they might suggest, but possibly trying to get more involved with sending out surveys and getting that feedback. Just a thought.
I know that in working with past principals on PTA, what was really super effective is when a principal came with one particular question, only one question to get feedback from PTA on, and per meeting. It was just that it was super easy. We only had to think about one thing. It was a focused answer. And it was quick, easy, and it was connected somehow to what the principal needed, whether it was a SIPSA piece or climate and culture piece or whatever it was. But I remember it was super effective, and it was a much better discussion when we had the one and done. It was just, I don't know, that was personally for me very, very effective.
Heather, thank you. I've always, when I look at all the details in the LCAP, I'm always impressed with all the things that you come up with. I've said in some of those meetings and like, wow, how did she come up with all these different details? So thank you for all the work that you do, and that all the different people that work with you to put together all these details for the LCAP. I appreciate it. And with that, I think we've kind of already been partially doing this, but we're supposed to go into discussion of the LCAP. So 10, discussion information items that the board would like to discuss or information presented to the board. These items do not require board action. And number 1 under 10 is board LCAP discussion, which we've kind of been having. So
through all the various data presentations and reports, including this conversation, I mean, areas of focus and how that I'm not doing the how, but just like the what, like you said, math and reading, Bill, are super important. We just are struggling, and it affects everything. And Senator Choa-Bogue, you know, she has stressed reading. She also has stressed accountability. She is very much about accountability. And as such, we need to be cognizant of that, of our accountability to our children, to our students. Chronic absenteeism. I know that, you know, our families struggle. There are Mountain High School kids they just have a special place, and some of their home lives just absolutely make me tear up, how much they struggle. And you're just so in awe over the fact that they're even getting to school. But what else can we be doing? Reaching out one-on-one with students and their families to understand the barriers and obstacles of getting their kids to school is so important. Is it bus passes are free? Is it just getting the pass itself? Can I hand deliver you a bus pass? I don't know. It's just, what are those barriers? And I think one-on-one is important to find out from those students and their families what is causing those issues, and what can we help? What services can be provided to help them? For me, as always, because it just is something that I beat up all the time, is the A through G completion rate, because it's a big umbrella for the DF rate. Course selection, tracking our students with, counselors tracking our students. So there's the counselor piece, there's the academic piece, and then there's the intervention piece. During the day interventions, we have to do something during the day while we have the students, because after high school is over, the kids are off, whether it's work, babysitting, extracurricular sports, whatever it is. We just have to be able to capture those kids. And one of the things that just in Mr. Williams's presentation on DF rate, which includes the electives, because electives are part of A through G. I mean, when you have in 9th grade, this is the end of first semester of the 2022-2023 year, you have 34.3% of your students getting a D, at least one D, and 22.3% of your students getting at least one F. And then the 10th grade, it jumps to like 48% Ds, 41%. What that means is that because Jordana has touched on this, grade recovery, we don't have that in place. So we now have relegated pretty much almost half of our student population who will not be able to be A through G eligible by their senior year. And that is a crime. We need to be held accountable. And in our LCAP, we want to reach 50%. Well, when we're sitting in the 20 percentile, how are we going to get to 50%? What are those, and that is a college and career indicator on the dashboard. I know we didn't have it, but it's going to happen. And it's just, this is something that is, for me, a crime in 9th grade, 10th grade. Those decisions, the decision of a child is being limited by their fall of their senior year, because maybe they needed extra intervention. Maybe they just didn't get right advice, whatever it is. I just think we have to be held accountable to that statistic, which is horrifying in my opinion.
Other discussion of the LCAP. Go ahead, Scott.
You know, I as a student, I struggled in junior high. I struggled with reading quite a bit. And for some reason, I just couldn't see things clearly. And it wasn't until I had Mrs. Berg, who eventually told me, Scott, you did not read this story, did you? And, you know, she was just such a sweet lady that it made me try harder. And I went through RIM. If it wasn't for sports, if it wasn't for some of the very dynamic teachers that I did have, and I did complete the A through G, much to my surprise. And the teachers helped push me that way, which was great. But I did not have that good home life. I was that student that Cindy's talking about. And the school needs to be that place where the kids come and they get what they need. That's the one thing that they look forward to during the day, that they're getting what they need. And I don't think we're talking about surveys and things like that. I think we have a large population of our kids that we are not meeting their needs, specific needs, because I don't want to say anything. Again, A through G, we need that, but we also need to somehow capture the other kids that aren't, and we need to push them that way. But we need to also sometimes just say we need to provide opportunities for these kids that are going to be acceptable to them. That they're going to want to come to school every day. That they're going to want to be there every day. You know, and it starts with things like lunches and clubs and sports, but it's that general classes, the general classes that they come to and they're like, wow, I'm connecting with this. This is where I'm really connecting. And I think we're not reaching out to some of those students that are struggling with the reason why they have to be there every day. And I hear it quite a bit, because when I'm out and about and I'm talking to kids and I see kids that are in our community. I ran into a kid today in the snowplow. He stopped in front of my house and he wanted to just say, he's driving the snowplow around and working for our community now. And it was amazing to see that, because he's an active member of our community. And I can't remember if he actually even graduated from high school. I'm not sure that he did. I know that he struggled quite a bit. And to see him out there just happy and doing what he loves to do, and it makes me think about what could we have done better for him, because he was one of those kids that they struggle to get there every single day, because some kids just want to go to school and get some basic stuff out of it because they have different plans for their lives. And some of it's cultural, and they need to be guided in different directions. But when was the last time we actually sat down with our 9th graders and our 10th graders? And what is it that you really want out of life? What do you want out of life? What can we do to serve you better? And did not a survey. Some of these surveys that I would see as a teacher where they have to put the happy face on it and it's got a 1 through 5 or whatever, and it just gives you specific things. Why aren't we sitting down with kids and actually talking to them and asking them, what is it that you would really want to see? Give me some key points. What are your interests? What do you want? And I don't think we do that. I haven't seen it.
Did you do that, Scott, as a teacher?
I talk to kids all the time about that and about what they want and what they want out of life. But I was a PE teacher, and I would just do it occasionally and talk to kids because I got to teach them how to pass volleyball as well. So, but I see that we have that need. We have that need that we need to actually sit down with them and discuss that with them and find out specifics they want. I ran into a girl and she was telling me how she's going to school now, but she's interested in, she wants to be a hairstylist. And I think that's just a moment in her life. She's a very smart girl. I can tell that she probably won't do that for the rest of her life, but that's what she wants right now. And she's told me that she's just interested in going there every day. She's learning so much. And for the first time, she says that she's interested in going to school. And it's kind of sad that we didn't have some other things in school that maybe taught her more of a business aspect or things that they need more in a general area of being successful, just being part of society, so that they can see that they have the ability to do things. And I think sometimes we just push kids one way towards college. And I don't ever mind, because I got pushed that way too. And it was great for me, because I would have never done that if I didn't get pushed. But, sometimes kids just don't want that. And we need to try and address their needs when they don't want it, as well as push them.
That's where career exploration, Scott, really needs to be very organized. And we've been haphazard with career exploration, because having those opportunities, whether it's formalized through Naviance or virtual job shadow, those programs that have been brought to campus, but having that conversation even younger than high school, what does introducing them to careers, even though they don't, bringing firefighters to an elementary school, maybe they're not like connecting it to a career, but they're being introduced, and having it more formalized in high school where they understand what the education piece is. Like for hairstyling, you go to a trade school, you go to a beauty school. Firefighter, this is what you do. Optometry, you go to this. So I think that piece, Scott, is also missing. The career exploration, the formal, very consistent year on year, where it's not a hodgepodge, where this year we have it and this year we don't. And because I think that is exactly what you're talking about, triggering that light bulb in somebody going, I don't want to go to college, but I love that idea. And this, if I go to this trade school, here's my starting salary. I just love that. And so but I think we're also failing the college piece as well, Scott. If you look at the data, we're failing in the college part, and we're failing in the career part, because we do not have that formal piece to help our students explore options. Yes, we have a great CTE program with pathways. However, it's 9. It's not everything.
Right. No, I agree with you. And I think because I absolutely believe that we need to push towards college immensely. I agree with that. But when you have a daily reason for that kid to come to school, that daily reason where they can focus on those little things, like you said, and we need to just keep developing this and keep pushing this. And I agree with you 100% on that. And I was very hopeful to when Brian was there talking about high school in that construction class, because the construction class, you can teach so many different aspects to the kids where they can find something that they really might connect with. And once you get them connecting on a daily basis, then you get them learning all the other things that they need to learn about. And then they can easily be pushed towards college. If I was not an athlete in high school, I would not have passed high school. I would not have done it. It was not for me. And that's the sad thing, because even though I struggled, it was because of sports that I was able to succeed and push further. And I'm so thankful for that. And it's thankful that my counselors and my teachers pushed me to do that. So, but it's that one little thing that we need to find for everybody.
Jordan.
Thank you. Scott, Cindy, I think you bring up excellent points of, I'll say, persistent issues that we know exist and we know we need to address. I think not to undercut the value of that, but I do think we are making really great steps towards addressing some of these core issues that I think will finally move some of the needles. We talked about CTE and, you know, really taking a hard look at how these programs are structured and what they're providing to the community at large. You know, are we offering the right pathways right now? I'm appreciative that we're looking at those questions, and I'm appreciative that Dr. Fricker is going and looking through all of these departments, having each department create those 3-year plans to figure out, to get the answer of those questions. What do we need to do in order to bring ourselves to where we need to be? We're investing in our elective programs. I mean, Scott, you make such a great point that for a lot of students, it's an extracurricular that brings them to the finish line in schooling. And we've been making good progress towards that, particularly with music education. That was an area that drastically needed attention, and we finally invested into. We're working on our community schools grant and partnerships, building more, better, stronger ties with the community to really tie and address the whole student. We are actively talking about, I'm hopeful for, some type of bond so they can provide the proper infrastructure, the proper, safe, comfortable learning environment so that even students that have a hard life, a hard home life, can come to school and feel comfortable, that can be, hopefully in an ideal world, in AC during hot months and times. We are making, I think, good steps. I think it's important to continue to talk about everything that we are right now and continue asking, why is it that these issues are persistent and why do they continue to exist? But I'm encouraged by some of what we're seeing here and the progress that we're making towards a lot of these that I think are really fundamental for why we're seeing a lot of these issues persist within our community. I won't say our schools, I'll say our community in general. So I just want to call out some of those positives that, like I said, are making small steps towards what we really need to be making steps towards.
Bottom line, every teacher matters. In fact, every staff person, you don't even have to be a teacher to connect with a student. Every staff person in the district has the ability to connect with, encourage, and help a student to feel valued and all. Dr. Fricker, we are trying to do some things with intervention though, right? So talk to us about what we're doing even with RTA and trying to do some intervention right now. And by the way, will our new positions that we're seeking candidates for and trying to make those decisions, will student services, the PR position, won't they also help us some in trying to address some of these big needs that we're all concerned about? I see Dana, but just let Kim, please.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Jordan, I can ask, and then I can answer it all. Are you sure?
Oh no, I had other things I was going to discuss, so I don't want to change the subject. So you go ahead. Okay.
So I think when you start peeling this onion back, and even myself coming into this district and looking at the history of where we've been as RIM Unified, where we want to go, the question really becomes, how are we going to get there? And that was one of the questions that, you originally had asked in the presentation, and it's really a multi-pronged answer. There's a lot of components why students don't come to school. There's a lot of barriers that we as RIM Unified have to overcome that other districts don't have to overcome. So we do have to unpack those on the one-to-one, that human level, and figure out what are those barriers for them to come, how can we mitigate those barriers, and then how can we put in systems and processes that are going to, alleviate that as a concern. Are we ever going to in total? Probably not. But we are going to get better at it. We have to get better at it because we have to have students in our classrooms in order for them to learn the valuable lessons that they're going to need the rest of their lives, no matter whether they go to college, and if that's Harvard, all the way down to our local state school, to a community college, to a trade school, even in pursuit of their own business, or even if they go right from our doors to the military or our doors into the world of work. They are going to need a basic level of skills for them to navigate through this thing that we call life and actually be functional adults and support themselves. So that is our ultimate goal. There's a lot of different layers in that. We do, am I muted? Sorry, delayed. So we do have to cater to the student who wants to go to the highest level of university, and we do have to cater to the student who wants to go to a trade school or to the world of work. And putting in those systems and structures that we are planning on putting in are going to help. The first thing you have to do is evaluate what we have. And then make sure we plan to make what we have better and much more efficient and much more effective. Because when we talk about adding a bunch of different things, I can already see, even though I can't see Jenny on my screen, I can see her cringe, because we're small and we don't have this big fiscal budget, and we don't have this plethora of staff that are going to help us do it. So we have to be very streamlined, we have to be very strategic, and we have to be very smart about what we tackle, when we tackle it, and then move on to the next thing. So when we talk about interventions, looking at how do we engage our community? How do we engage the retirees within our community? How do we engage the people who want to raise their hand and volunteer? We are very fortunate. If we want engagement, we have to go to an area where people in our community want to be engaged. And we have to look at their passions and give them options, like a smorgasbord of, you can choose retirement reads. You can come in and have a first or second grader read to you, and you can work one-on-one with a student. And you can actually help them orally read, and they can process it as they're reading out loud to an adult person. We will never be able to hire enough staff or intervention specialists in order to target every single school and every single student, and give them every single opportunity or intervention they need. So we have to think outside of the box. We have to think about our community. We have to invite our community in, and we will screen them, and we will go through the processes. And I'm sure Mr. Hansen will go through the HR nightmare of making sure that they're all screened and ready to go. But if we don't start thinking differently and using our resources that we have access to differently, we're not going to solve this problem. And so making small strides of just like a retirement reads program, where we invite the community in. A youngster can read one-on-one to an adult. The beauty of that is they practice that oral therapy, but they don't have to choral read. You talk about strategies. They don't have to choral read in front of their class, right? Any student who has difficulty learning something new, and they have to do it in front of their peers for the first time, and they are put directly on the spot, they're going to feel shame, guilt, and doubt. And that is like the trifecta of permanently, and I'm going to say damaging, young people. And it erodes confidence, and it creates fear. And that's one thing that we can't do. Education is a loving institution. It's geared on growth. It's geared on development. And so we have to nurture that and foster that at our very young levels. And so if you have a retired person coming in and you have a youngster reading to them, They don't have the fear of doing it in front of their classmates. They can try, they can fail, they can make all sorts of mistakes, they can hear themselves. And once they start catching their own mistake, having a student, any student, all students, read out loud is probably one of the most amazing instructional strategies that you can put in that will have tremendous amount of difference for their entire life. It is probably the best strategy. And the only reason I know that and say that is because my daughter was dyslexic, and my youngest, and she struggled. And when she was in first grade, the teacher didn't move her on to this. There's 2 books, they didn't move her on to the second half of the first grade literature book. And when I said, why is she reading the same story? We already read these, And when the teacher said, but she struggles, she can't read. And I said, but not giving her the challenge of working through it is denying her the ability to ever find out that you can have a struggle, but you can also find the way to overcome it. And they wanted to put her into special education. And not that I am opposed to special education at all, because there are students who need those services. But before we put students in special education and we pull them out of our valuable classrooms in front of our brilliant teachers, and we remove them to a setting away from their peers, why don't we give them different options? So they wanted to do that for my daughter. And I said, I understand that, but giving her half the curriculum and expecting her to catch up to her peers doesn't mathematically make sense to me. And I asked the principal at the time, and I said, and I was a counselor at the time, so I'd been in the educational profession at the time that this happened. I said, by the time she gets to be a senior in high school, she's going to have a 6th grade education. How is that going to help her? How on earth is that going to help her? And that just didn't resonate well with me as a mom. And it didn't resonate well with me for any other student that I counseled or any other student that I oversaw. So I said, why don't we do this? Why don't you give me her textbooks in the summertime, which the school didn't really want to do. But I said, please give me the textbook in the summertime. And we kind of had to navigate through a 504 plan to get the textbook. However, in 2 years, she was reading on grade level, because I sat on pool decks watching my other kids play water polo, and she would read to me. And I made her read to me out loud. And so in 2 years, not only was she on grade level, but by the time she was in 6th grade, she was in advanced math. When she went on to intermediate school, she was in honors classes. When she went into high school, she was in AP and accelerated in advanced placement classes. And she graduated in the top 15% of her class. That would not have happened had you not intervened in the deficit area that she had. But the key is getting to the student's deficit area and turning that around and creating within them that you can provide a modality to get to the highest level that you are able to achieve. Now, all students at highest levels, that's not equal. It's never going to be equal because we're all different. We're all unique human beings. But understanding fundamentally what kids need is what our district needs to do. And when we do that, then you can put in those targeted strategies that actually will make a difference down the line. I do believe, going back to Mr. Kraft, your idea and talking with Brian, and ever since I've gotten here too, and talking with Stephanie, and making that construction, that the trades class into a construction trades class, and giving them the option of having a plethora of skills that they can draw from in the trades that could actually go into building a home or building a tiny home, or, doing some of those things that give them real world experience. That's what we need to do. Integrating our curriculums so that our science classes pair up with our computer science classes, or our engineering classes pair up with our physics classes. It can't be a competitive world. It has to be a unified world. It has to be an integrated world where we link our core classes, if you want to go into that, with our trades classes. So that we have a long way to go. We've talked to Stephanie, I've talked to Brian, and we're starting to put in those plans in our 3-year plans to build toward that end. But students have to see the purpose of education. They have to see it all coming together in a culminating project that has practical applicability, not just a checkbox of saying we did an assignment or we did a group project or we did, these little elements of it. It all has to integrate together. And so that's really where we need to go. Retirement reads, or having our retirement community come on in. 1, get to be familiar with our campuses. 2, we'll give you a meal. I've already talked to food services about that. And it's a give get. Help us, we'll help you. If you're on fixed incomes, we'll help you. You can have a meal and you can help a student all in one afternoon, and that really is the power of our community. And we need to harness the power of our community. Sorry about the rant, Bill. Sorry, Mr. President.
You're the educator, like I said to Heather. You guys are the educators. What do you need from the board to be able to help those things happen? Things you've been talking about. What do you need from the board? The board we're not the educators. Some of us have been educators, but we're not. So what do you need from the board?
I think the board is extremely supportive in where we are and where we want to go. I think the board is extremely directional as to what they want to see, which is good because you have to have a focus from the top. You have to know where you're going in order to get there, so to speak. And I think giving our teams time to work together and have those meetings and really dive into what are those problems. Let's figure out what those barriers are. And then let's put the plans together to overcome those barriers. You have to really know the core root of what you're dealing with if you really want to find the solutions. And what's going to retrofit or custom fit to a district. And what you can find in a different district, you just can't piece it out of a district, cut a square around, take it out of one district and put it into another. You just can't. You're going to have to customize the correction and the fit for this district because, we are so unique. And I think this recent weather that we've had really showcased how unique we are. And it showcased how interreliant we have to be. You have to rely on the systems that are up here. I kept saying through the whole thing, it's like Apollo 13. I'm on Apollo 13. This is all I have. You don't have anything else on top of this mountain. I have to work within what I have, and we have to start working together and pulling in the resources and the people that want to be engaged. And there are many, and we just have to figure out the ways of saying yes and figuring out the solutions as we go. So I do think the board has been very patient and graceful, and I think that they've been very supportive on that mission. And I do think we have to push the envelope of expectation. We have to want more for our families. We have to believe in the capabilities of our students. Because when I was a counselor, I always used to say to fellow staff mates, I would say, listen, you've got to believe in them before students will believe in themselves. You've got to teach them how to believe in themselves. So I think the board is very graceful in that. And I think that you have been very supportive. But also you have been very direct as to what you want to see and where you want the district to go. And I really think that's the function of the board.
I want to just piggyback on one thing that Dr. Fricker said, that Jordan, this was your big thing that you spoke about so often, is the community schools aspect of it. And you're right, there's been progress. And I think there's progress in this area and this Snowmageddon has really shown that we do need to move in this direction, provide the wraparound services, really get into the nitty gritty of what our families need and tying that into our community resources. I think that, you have spoken about this so often, and this event really has highlighted that we definitely have to provide those wraparounds. We have to be the one-stop shop for our families. So, thank you for just keep talking about it, because it really highlighted during this storm that we need to do that.
We believe in our staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm again reiterating the fact that it's all of our staff. It's security person, cafeteria worker, teacher, we believe in our staff, and we also, I think most of us share the thought that our work has to happen during the school day, when the students are there. So in the classroom, on campus, through the different activities, it's got to happen there. Intervention's got to happen there. And so I think every one of our staff really matters. So Jordana, go ahead.
Thank you. So I had some notes written down, and actually there's a lot of things, no, I wouldn't say it as eloquently as Dr. Fricker did, but in terms of pulling in our community, wanting to make sure that it's somehow in the LCAP in terms of making sure that we're doing a better job in the future of utilizing our community as a resource. Snowmageddon has really showed what strengths our community does have, and how there are so many amazing people, organizations out there that I truly believe could be phenomenal resources for our community. Dr. Fricker mentioned our retirement community, our retirees quite a bit. In the past, we've talked about alumni, and I do know that there are a considerable number of alumni who would love to provide help in various ways to our students. Going back to what Scott had said about basically, yes, go a 4-year university, or even post-secondary education is not for everybody. I do believe it's incredibly important that we as a school district make sure that along the way, students are finding that doors are being opened for them, not being closed. So we want to help guide our students to make sure that we're opening up as many doors to the future as possible. So as Dr. Fricker mentioned, as far as the direction we're going in CTE, having multi-layered coursework, so it could be hitting different students in different ways and providing some insights to them in terms of what might be possible in construction or in other areas, so that where they may initially be thinking, I want to go in this direction, they might see the value in the so what in their core curriculum courses to be able to go further, so allow them to pursue a future that they hadn't otherwise thought of. So being able to better utilize our community, our alumni, and other resources is incredibly important. The other thing that, just looking at so far what's happened in the LCAP and what I've seen written here, I really think that we need to be persistently aware of the socio-emotional learning issues that our students are and actually our staff also are dealing with. Having gone from COVID to the incredible storms that we're dealing with, there's no doubt that the continued trauma and stress is going to hamper student learning. And so being able to make sure we incorporate into our planning continued structures and supports to make sure our staff continues to thrive. And then of course, our students are being able to be the best they can be. It's very important that we keep those elements in consideration.
Jordana, I have to say, you said, I'm not as eloquent as Dr. Fricker, but I think you're pretty darn eloquent. So thank you. I have to say that today, when I went out with my snowblower after the storm today, I know it wasn't a big one. I started up that thing and we started going, and I started crying because I didn't realize how much I couldn't do it one more time. And then you put that in context of everybody is feeling this collective trauma. And so you're right, Jordana, it is everybody. It is staff. It is our support services on the mountain. It is everybody that is really going to have a recovery period. So thank you for being so eloquent.
Shucks, thank you.
Okay, with that, is there anything else in the LCAP discussion? And just a reminder, this is a workshop. It's meant to be discussion. It's meant to be conversation. It's not a normal board meeting, so it's meant to have this kind of conversation. For anyone who's maybe listening in, it's supposed to be a discussion time. So we're going to move on then to review and discuss our mission, vision, and core values. Believe you all have them. Uh, our goal number 1 is Rim of the World Unified School District.
Can I quickly interrupt? I prepared 4 board goals based on this attachment, but our agenda item is mission, vision, and core values. So I did spend time preparing a review for our school board goals, but that's not what's on the agenda.
It's mission and vision where we're touching base on it. So I know it's been part of our long-term goal of starting a process to revise it because it hasn't been done in a while. But yeah, you're right, Jordana. It's not school board goals. It's the mission vision.
So
So I'm gonna give you props, Jordana, for bringing homework to the board discussion. So I'm not being facetious. I'm like, I feel badly. So can we share screen? Is there the ability to share screen of what the mission and the vision of the school district is? Oh, wow, grammar. Jordan, you're usually grammar person.
Mark, is there a way to allow everyone to have, or at least whoever wants to share?
Everyone can share their screen at any time.
Thank you, Mark. So do you actually have them, Cindy, or does Jordana? Is there a yes or no from someone?
Sorry, I did not see them in the board docs.
Yeah, I've been searching for them, couldn't find them.
Yeah, I looked earlier to see if we could share doc. So the only thing I can say is if they're posted on our actual website. Let me see. Hold on, hold please.
Are we looking for the school board goals for 2023?
No. What we're looking for is the actual school district mission statement and vision statement. And then the core beliefs. And so they should be now, since we don't have them in the board docs, I'm looking at the actual homepage of our Jordana, are you looking in the same place, hun? And so I'm looking now on our homepage. And I am.
Looks like it's on our school board page. I'll drop the link here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan.
About the Board of Education. If you go to Board of Education and then about the Board of Education.
Awesome. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, so Bill, as president, do you want to read it out? Oh, look it. You started. Yay. Thank you, board president.
Can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all right there. Rim of the World Unified District empowers our students with the tools, skills, and confidence that they will need to continue as lifelong learners and to take advantage of the opportunities of the future. The Rim of the World Unified Governing Board of Trustees are residents and taxpayers in our community, individuals seeking to become a trustee. I'm going to move past that, if it's okay with you, to the district mission statement. Rim of the World Unified School District ensures that all students are college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed, to make positive contributions to our world. The district vision, Rim of the World Unified School District and our mountain community are dedicated to ensuring each student achieves academic and individual excellence by engaging all students in meaningful programs which meet the highest educational and ethical standards within a caring, collaborative learning environment, becoming lifelong learners, critical thinkers, and responsible citizens. And then you'll see our district core values, our collaboration to work towards common goals through the sharing of our responsibilities amongst expertise and all stakeholder groups, personal and collective accountability to honor obligations and take ownership of our actions and results, integrity to demonstrate honesty, trustworthiness, and strong moral principles, equity to ensure students and stakeholders receive fair treatment and that students have access to educational opportunities according to their unique needs, caring and compassion, to treat others with empathy and genuine concern for their well-being, and to display mutual respect and support of others.
Wow, the whole meeting their unique needs, Scott. Look at that. Right in the core values and beliefs, Scott.
So how well are these understood by all staff?
If I were guessing, I would say not well. I think in some districts you would say any staff member any day should be able to rattle off your mission or rattle off the vision statement. You know, it's clear, it's simple, it's concise as to what that core mission is. In education, sometimes our mission and vision become very long and cumbersome, so they're not easily, you know, kind of memorized or distributed out into the community. But I do think that we probably need a resurgence of focus on the mission, vision, and then what our core values are.
We used to, when these were first developed, revisited and then refined, redeveloped, the district office put together like a pager with these things, and it was really pretty, and it was like a leave behind that we could utilize and put, whether they're in real estate offices or in meetings or whatever. We had 1-page document with this, with our little logo, and it was very, very colorful. So just saying, a long time ago.
Obviously, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, these are great. And like Cindy said, it's getting it out there a little bit to everybody, but also, you know, once we have, like Jordan said, we have so many things we're moving towards that are going to help all that we're talking about and focus on that. And, but it's also, like Cindy said, we have to think outside the box. So how do we go beyond that a little bit more? And in promoting ourselves, especially as we're looking at a bond to take care of all these necessities that we need to be strong within our community, and we have to have examples of that happen every single day in our schools, and those have to be put out along with our mission and vision, so that the community members see the things in the strides that we're making towards providing all this stuff that we are, and going to hopefully in the future do a much better job at as well, always improving to reach the needs of each student individually, that we can do that. So I think the more we promote that, the better we're going to be as we move forward.
Go ahead, Shannon.
When you look at a mission and vision statement, when I went through NISO a couple years back, and I went with a couple of your principals doing the same NISO, and your vision and mission statement it's imperative for the district side, our school board side and everything, but really understanding the core values of our district is what our students, families, and staff should really collaborate with and combined and what's what I'm looking for, like come together for and wrap everything around it, because it is the core values is what happens inside the classroom. It is what happens out on the playground, going from our noon duties all the way up to our principals, when we're dealing with our students and our families and with each other. If we follow the core values, or if you follow, you know, the district basics of what we expect out of our employees, out of our families, and out of our students, it becomes a third point, and you focus on that third point, and it doesn't become like, you know, it becomes part of you, if that makes sense. So I really believe the core values is coincides with your mission and vision statement, and that's something that we push into our classrooms and our sites.
I like how you said that, Shannon. Thank you.
Frankly, I appreciate the fact that these items are not just for the classroom. These core values have got to go through every part of our system. So it's, are we treating with caring and compassion our fellow board members? Are we treating with caring and compassion the students? Are we treating with caring and compassion our administrators? Are we treating with caring and compassion all of the different workers in all of the different positions? It's really more than just the classroom, isn't it, Shannon?
Yeah, yes, it is. I mean, it goes back to what Jordan was stating and what we've been talking about. It goes back to the community, and it goes back to our community schools and our community core values that represent our schools and our families.
So how do we want to evaluate the Board of Trustees in these?
Well, that not that the evaluation, the evaluatory process really goes under us evaluating ourselves. But if you want to talk about how do we push this out, do we want to how do we go forward in pushing this out? Like Shannon said, making sure that like our district core values are really representative and integrated into our schools from the playground on up. I think that's been a missing piece. Nobody can tell you what these are because we just through various different factors, whether it was COVID, whatever, we just have not done a successful awareness program of what we stand for.
Cindy, you're the one who's been the longest here. You have the longevity of anybody in this group right here, right now, except for Jenny.
Nope, Jenny.
I don't see Jenny, so I can't tell you whether she's on or not. But you and Jenny, how have we actually even communicated these to our school community? Forget about the outside community. Just how have we communicated it inside?
So the thing is that when these were first developed, like I said, we developed a very colorful one-pager. Then we developed like site posters, for lack of a better word, that were posted in the front office for as parents were walking in, they were there. Our superintendent at the time, when going into community groups, whether it was Rotary or whatever, would talk about what we stand for, these core values, our mission, our vision, because but again, Bill, as what happens is that time passes and there's like a turnover. When you have turnover, you don't have stability of practices and procedures and protocols and all of that. And so things tend to go by the wayside as other things clamor for your attention. And I think that maybe just going back to the practice of how do we want to re-engage these in the conversation with the community and with our schools and our principals. You know, what does this look like and how do we want to look? You know, obviously maybe the the mission statement, vision statement, and the core values, instead of being embedded into Board of Education, because it's really district, maybe we have them on the very first page, that when you go to our website, there it is, boom, in your face. Maybe we do create leave behinds so that when we go to, as board members, go to Lake Arrowhead Municipal, Crestline Connects, Crestline MAC, the Government Affairs Committee, we can use these when we talk about our district. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. I think everybody can connect to our core values. I mean, I really think that these were prominent during the Snowmageddon. I really do. Every single one. And so I think that we go back to, how do we make these more prominent? And because we did a campaign, so to speak, a campaign. I think that maybe we redesign a poster, make it all snazzy fassy, and make sure that they are in the front offices. I know that sounds stupid. Do parents really read what's on the bulletin board? Some parents do, as they're checking out their kid or whatever, but at least it's one more avenue of how we can communicate this. Superintendent newsletter, media committee, Facebook. We can utilize our Facebook. Did you know what our core values are, what we stand for? Pick out the ones that you saw in action during Snowmageddon. Oh, wait, all of them were in action. You know what I'm saying is be playful with them as well, but do a social media campaign.
We may want our staff to grade us ourselves and the school district on how are we doing at these core values.
If we have someone who is taking the position of promotional, this can be something that they are also tasked with. How do we re-engage with this, with our community and with our schools?
Because I think you really have to live it inside before you go out and say, this is what we are. You have to say, are we doing it inside? Jordan, you had a thought.
No, I'm in agreement. I think this is something that we should definitely be self-reflective on as a board and as a district as a whole. I think Cindy brings up a great point that this is probably something that would also fall under the jurisdiction of the Director of Public Affairs position if someone were to step into that role. Again, not to say this is what we're doing, but to push out what is the reality, Are we living these values like you're saying, Bill? So that's all.
Thanks, Jordan. Scott.
I agree totally with Cindy. This is what has to happen. We have to sell it that way. We have to promote it and show it, and the Director of Public Affairs can help with that, and we can keep pushing this out so that the community sees that we are doing all these things and all these positive things are happening within the school, and it'll help with the bond as well, because they'll see the need there to do all the other things that we need to do to protect our kids and keep them learning and moving forward.
Bill, you talk about self-reflecting and evaluating ourselves on these. If nobody knows what these are, then they can't grade us. So one of the things is we definitely need to push it out so that we can get it back, push it out and then give us our feedback.
So it seems like this is something that we ought to get out in writing again. And Mark, I know you're still listening because you help us do all this, but this is something that Cindy makes a good point that really ought to be somewhere at the forefront of the website for our school district.
I am not on mute. Hi. I've been reading them over, the core values especially, because I'm a huge believer in living your values and being very clear as an individual what I value and making sure my life is in alignment with those values. And I wonder about, in terms of these values aren't the school board's values, this is the district's values. And I almost would like to get some sort of reflection and feedback from our staff and possibly our students on if these truly reflect what our core values really are as a district.
That's why I was saying we really need to have a grading. When I was saying a grading, it wasn't
Well-
grading the board. It's really look at these core values. Are we doing them?
Well, I know, I mean, I understand, are we living those values? But I'd say even taking a step back, I mean, values should not change over time. They should be, you know, if they are really true core values, they really define who we are. And that isn't something over time that really should change, but not, you know, tremendously. And I'm just been, you know, trying to read these over time and time again, like thinking about our school district, and there we have some really phenomenal qualities. And I'd have to really spend some time thinking about it in terms of, for me and my reflection on it, is this truly representative of who we are? These are wonderful qualities, and I'd like to think that we do reflect those. But is this, you know, would our district really embrace these in thinking that this is who RIM Unified is, or are there maybe some other aspects that really, since we are such a unique community up here, are there things that we're not highlighting that truly reflect what our district truly is? I don't know.
At the time that these were done, there were truly a lot of people in the room,
Okay.
from all stakeholders. We had everybody from, you know, Joe Benita, who's very vocal, to teachers, administrators, other community members. And we sat at the old district office conference, and we literally on white sheets, everybody threw out words to reflect what they thought RIM was, and who we were and what we are. So it was a collaborative effort to put these together. It wasn't done in isolation by any means by the board or the superintendent at the time. I think that when we talk about, do we want to revisit and refine these, you know, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I mean, because you may decide, you know what, we didn't actually capture this or this. So we can look at refining our values, so to speak. Jordana, I totally agree with you. Is this who we want to put out there at the, especially, I do know that during one superintendent search, Dr. Fricker, just saying, a past superintendent search, what was interesting is that a couple of the superintendents at the time, they found our mission and vision statement, our core values, and two of them specifically loved our values. They specifically referenced the core values in what they did their homework. Anybody could go on a website, but I just thought it was interesting that they specifically said that the core values they were very much attracted to because it reflected their own values. So you're right, Jordana. Do these reflect us? I think that to a certain extent, they do still reflect us. Do we want to go back and refine them a little bit or whatever? Definitely we could do that if so desired. But I do think that in getting back to what Bill said in terms of that self-reflection, that grading, that kind of thing, it's like we really definitely need to put it out there, because we can't have a conversation of, is this who we are now, unless people know where this was put in place in 2014-15. You know what I'm saying? You can't have a conversation if you don't even know where the beginning point is.
I hear you. No, absolutely. And that's where I think just that it isn't the school board, it is the district, and to get people's reactions to it and make sure that this is something that defines us as a group, I think is important, and have those conversations.
So I've not stopped sharing because I wanted to leave the mission statement, the vision statement, and the core values up on the screen for as long as possible to have people see them. But I'd like to suggest, Dr. Fricker, that you and staff look at how to communicate those statements again to our school community first.
Yeah, no problem. I do think that we can run them through each school site staff for feedback and then bring that back to the board. And then if we want to make adjustment, we can, or discuss it at another workshop somewhere down the line. And then we can definitely publish them out and put them on our documents and put them more prominently on the website, but also make them more utilized in a functional aspect of our communications. So I agree.
All right. If it's okay with the board, we're going to move on because we do have some action items that we added to our workshop and we do need to cover them. So 11, action calendar. Number 1, business services approval of Form J13A, request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions.
So moved.
Is that Cindy Gardner?
Oh, shoot. Sorry, Bill. Yes, Cindy Gardner makes this motion to approve.
And is there a second?
A second, Scott Kraft.
Scott Kraft. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now, is there discussion on the business services recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve Form J13A, request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions? Dr. Fricker, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Oh, Jenny has her hand up.
Oh, Jenny does? I don't see it.
Well, I think Dr. Fricker or myself equally can speak to this, because something that we were talking about with Shannon earlier is if there is a desire to amend the motion to add today, and direct me and my staff to edit the document to add another snow day on there before submitting it to you all for signatures.
Just one more?
Well, that's all we can
Stop,
officially.
Bill. Stop.
I mean,
We're done. We are done.
I don't want to cry anymore over the white stuff.
we can very well need to have another discussion after tomorrow.
Don't jinx us, Jenny.
Okay, so we need to amend the motion to
Yeah.
include one more snow day? Would somebody make that amendment?
I make a motion to amend my motion to include one additional snow day to the proposal.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll
Scott?
second it, Scott Kraft.
Okay, so actually, are you including that? Are you amending your original motion? Cindy?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mellinger.
Then we
Cindy
can-
Gardner is amending the original motion.
All right, good. And Scott Kraft is seconding that with the amendment. Okay, to include one additional school day. Is any further discussion on that?
No more snow.
I appreciate the suggestion to add that additional snow day because we've had them. But also just wanted to note that the fiscal impact on this action item is to be determined. I would anticipate that our request would be approved, given all of the supporting documentation that is attached to this. But yeah, just wanted to make sure we noted that.
This really wouldn't be a fiscal impact, because the waiver would allow, as far as for the accounting of funds and instructional minutes, that as if these days happened. So for compliance reasons, for the instructional annual number of days, 180, and for the required number of annual minutes and daily minutes, and then for my LCFF calculation, it's as if those days happened, and it really just forces me to use a different divisor when calculating the average ADA attendance. So then
So it's as if those days happen, so that means we have 100% attendance on those days as if they happened, right?
No, because it's still cumulatively average for the actual days the kids have gone to school. So.
Nice try, Bill.
Okay. Any further discussion? Then we'll take the roll call vote. Bill Mellinger, Trustee Area 1, aye.
Dana Redland, Trustee Area 2, aye.
Cindy Gardner, Trustee Area 3, aye.
Scott Kraft, Trustee Area 4, aye.
Jordan Zarate, Trustee Area 5, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Number 2, business services approval resolution number 222310, accepting the transfer of real property building located at 27315 North Bay Road, Blue Jay, California 92317 to the district.
Cindy Gardner makes that motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second. Scott Kraft, second.
Any discussion?
Just
Thank
for
you.
anybody who might be listening in, maybe a brief description of what this and the following items are related to.
I
Somebody
was
can
just
check.
about to ask Jenny to do that.
Yes, this item in the 11.3, that's right below it. Everyone I think knows that our former district office at 27315 North Bay Road in Blue Jay is an escrow for sale. And part of the process has been working through some title issues. And upon looking at the title reports, there were, it's multiple parcels. And so not all the parcels were in the Rim of the World Unified School District's name. There was other parcels that were in a prior facility corporation that the district enacted in the 70s. And it's common for districts to do that when they build schools or issue certificates of participation. And then one parcel was actually in the Board of Trustees names. So just somewhere in the transfer of title in the 1995 when we bought the building, somehow a parcel got in the name of the Board of Trustees and not in Rim of the World Unified School District, and then it wasn't transferred out of the Facility Corp's name. So this is just fixing the ownership, even though they're all the same body. It's just the legal entity name needed to be corrected.
Thanks, Jenny. Any further discussion? Again, we'll take the same way by trustee area. We're going to vote. Trustee area 1, Bill Mellinger, aye.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2, aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3, aye.
Scott Kraft, trustee area 4, aye.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. 3, business services approval of resolution 222311, accepting the transfer of real property building located at 27315 North Bay Road, Blue Jay, California 92317 to the district. Can I entertain a motion?
Cindy Gardner, so motions to approve.
Cindy, is there a second?
Scott Kraft, second.
Scott? Any discussion?
I know a lot of work has been going into this, so I just want to express appreciation for all of that work. So thank you.
And it's been surprising at how much title work there has been. All right, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor, so we'll do it the same way. Trustee area 1, Bill Mellinger, aye.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2, aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3, aye.
Scott Kraft, trustee area 4, aye.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Number 4, business services approval of the True North Research Incorporated contract for bond feasibility survey for an evaluation of voters' interest in supporting a local bond measure and how best to align with district and community priorities. Do I entertain a motion?
Cindy Gardner, so motions to approve.
Cindy Gardner.
Scott Kraft, seconds.
And now discussion. Okay, Jenny. So why should we use True North Research?
Okay, sorry, I had my trouble getting myself off mute. I think that Adam did a really great job explaining, why this company and why, as I know the title's changed, as our financial advisor going out for a bond, why he still recommends them. And I think that the relationship that they've had with us, there's already been a lot of work done on the prior survey in 2020, but probably was done in 2019 on just the history of our district, having a little bit better pulse of it. I like the non-biased. I think too, when Adam, and that's one of the things that I've liked so much working with Adam, is he can explain things in layman's terms that we all need, because we need to be able to take some things very technical and be able to have, like dinner table conversations about them and with our neighbors and be able to explain them. And I think Adam does that very well also. And so that's one thing I appreciate, that I hadn't talked to, I always pronounce his last name wrong. So on the contract with Dr. I'm going to just mess it up, but talking to him again over the past couple weeks and getting this board agenda item ready, he's very down to earth, but he's also kind of a noble about him, and he'll tell us like it is. And so I think when you feel comfortable with someone, when there's a third party also explaining some very good reasons why, and the history he has with conservative areas, geographically, politically conservative, school district boundaries, I think that that's a benefit for REM for sure.
Any other discussion, Jen?
The other thing that I appreciated about True North is that similar to the last time they came and helped us, it's a fixed fee. So there's no chance of that going over the amount that we're quoting or approving tonight. And I appreciate a good fixed fee contract so that we know exactly what we're getting into, and that there's not the possibility of them coming back and saying, oh, actually, it's going to cost a little bit more.
I appreciated the fact that from what Adam was saying, that actually having the comparison with the statistics and the information from before, I was thinking that you would be able to get that regardless, but so if we did happen to have used some other firm, wouldn't we still have had that research available to us, Jenny?
We would have been able to give the study, the final result of the feasibility study to another, another vendor. But I don't know, to be honest, and this would have to be a question for Adam, is if there's any internal working papers or internal documents that are unique to them compiling the final result that might be beneficial for him then to share with us.
So I confess some concern about using both people that we used in the past when we failed in the past. So, and I did appreciate what Adam was bringing out about the significance of what was happening across the country in 2020. It wasn't just here.
I agree. I think that the bond did not pass, and it was a very small amount. And I think that the factors that came into play in March 2020 probably cost us that small margin of defeat. But I would like to see a comparison, and I would like to, and we've had discussion before about some of our challenges, which are, as Jordana has pointed out, our fixed income families, our retirees who express concern the first time, through Measure A, their concerns. So and as you said, Bill, getting those survey results will definitely guide us to that cost, whether it's 20, 30, 40, whatever. So I'm not so concerned about using the same people as before. I think that we had good processes and the best advice and guidance at that time. I just think that everybody got in the state going through a parcel tax or bond sort of got blindsided by factors that were completely outside the norm of what anybody, any advisor could even tout to us. So I'm much more hopeful this time that if we go forward with the bond, I think we're going to get, we will have good advice along the way to make the best possible choice for our community.
And Jenny, can you refresh my memory? What was the vote last time? Do you recall?
You know what? I don't have that at my fingertips right here. You and I looked at it together.
No, I know.
And I did bring some notes home because I'm not at my desk, of course. I don't think I grabbed that folder here, but it was very close. Yeah, it was very close.
I was thinking within 2%, but I don't quote me either.
Well, I think we calculated together. I think I had a memory of, right around 3 or 4% more would have shown up.
And also at the same time, the Mountains Community Hospital had a parcel tax on the ballot as well. So I am sure that having both on the same ballot really hurt as well.
It was really, Jordana, do you remember? Well, Jordan too, going out to speak at LA MAC, Crestline MAC, Government Affairs Committee, and hospital would give their presentation for why they needed an assessment bond, and then we would come right after them. And the Running Springs Chamber of Commerce, Jordan, was same thing, and it was just like we started working together instead of we were like, these two things are the most important things for our community, the hospital and schools. And so we tried to help each other convince people that both things have equal value. But it was awkward at first when we realized, oh, wow, great. So I remember that it was hard to not hard with working with them at all. We developed a great teamwork messaging, but it was just, oh, crud.
Well, go ahead, Jordan.
I understand the concern of using two of the same firms that we used last time around, but I'll also note that we have not even talked about a bond consultant at all. Last time around, we used Clifford Moss as our bond consultant, and I think that would have a heavy factor in future plans. It's not to say we would or wouldn't use them, or that we need a consultant or don't need a consultant at all. I'm just saying that was another big factor in strategizing towards getting to the bond, getting to election day for that bond. So that's another huge, I would say, X factor as we move forward.
Jordan, did you actually consider a consultant before you took these steps?
Having a little difficulty recalling the timeline on that, but I think first we start with feasibility before we move towards discussion of bond consultants.
Okay, because we still haven't said whether we're going to do it or not. We're trying to evaluate and assess whether we should. And so you do that before you then would actually go get somebody to consult. Okay. Is there any other, yes, Scott?
Yeah, I also believe you as a board, prior to me being on there, have really listened to what the community had to say as well, because one of the things was the consolidation of the properties that were here. I think that was a big part of it too, that people thought, well, we have all these other things that we're not utilizing, we're not really using anymore. And so the board's done a good job of that and really listening to the concerns that I think the community had before we move forward with that. And I think our messaging is going to be different now, and our needs are greater and affect the community more, and they'll be able to see that, especially with having a director of public affairs and everybody promoting it in the way that it seems like it's going. I think it's going to be a much more positive result.
Okay. Are we ready to vote on True North? All right, we'll do it we're gonna do it the reverse way, starting with number 5.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Scott Kraft, trustee area 4, aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3. Aye. Oh, I almost forgot that most important vote.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2, aye.
Bill Mellinger, trustee area 1, aye, and I'm impressed we could count backwards. Wow. Consent calendar, items pulled for separate vote, and there's only one item, so does anyone want it pulled? It's one item. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar. Agenda item 13.0, Educational Services, approval of the annual overnight California State Thespian Festival, Friday, March 31, 2023 through Sunday, April 2nd, 2023 at Upland High School with hotel lodging at the Hyatt Place, Ontario, California for the Rim of the World High School Drama Class.
Cindy Gardner makes that motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Scott Kraft, second.
All right. Any discussion?
Good luck, Rim. Go Fighting Scots. Go do that drama and win.
One more
Get
special
those
part of our
monologues
school.
in.
Yes. All
I was
right.
a drama major, so I'm super excited about how successful they're going to be.
All those in favor say, oh, sorry, got to do it the same way. Trustee Bill Mellinger, trustee area 1, aye.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2, aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3, aye.
The area 4, aye.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Carried unanimously. Governance team, future agenda items. Does anyone have anything that you want to put on for future agenda items? Does anyone want to review the mission vision statement in the future, or do you want to leave that alone for the moment?
I think that we get through the rest of this year and then regroup, maybe at the retreat.
Good.
I do think that we have an agenda issue in terms of not having the opportunity for the agenda to go back to closed session.
Thank you, Jordana. Ooh, we do have an issue.
Yep, it's not there. So that means we should have changed our agenda earlier.
But the workshop,
About 3 hours ago.
yeah.
So Jordana, I hear you making a motion to adjust the agenda to go back to closed session.
Yes, you heard me say that.
And do I hear a second from
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3. 3.
Okay.
That's yes.
And again, we'll take the same vote backwards.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Scott Kraft, trustee area 4, reluctantly an aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3, aye.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2, aye.
Bill Mellinger, trustee area 1. Oh, I'm so tempted. Aye. Okay, with that, we're going to do that now, and future meeting dates, we'll go do that later. Although is that okay? Do it later? Okay, so we are going to go back to closed session, and with that.
And Bill, I made you the co-host of the closed session, but if
Okay.
it doesn't work, text me and I'll open it up.
I will, thank you, Jenny.
Mhm.
All right,
Okay.
so we are adjourning the part of the open session at 8:40.